Welcome to Midnight Lullaby, a place where every shadow tells a story and help you get into sleep today. So before that, like the video and subscribe the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, let the darkness cradle you as the tale begins. The radio crackles at precisely 6:47 p.m., same as every evening. Static fills the silence, then nothing. I set down my coffee, lukewarm again, always lukewarm, and adjust the frequency dial with fingers that know these movements by heart. Click, click, static. Click, click, a silence. My name is Marcus, I think. The brass nameplate on my desk says M. DVS, but the letters seem to shift when I'm not looking directly at them. Sometimes they spell M. DV'd, sometimes just M. The Forest Service assigned me to Tower 47 6 months ago. Or was it 6 years? Time moves differently up here, 70 feet above the canopy, where the wind whispers secrets through the pine needles, and the horizon curves away into forever. I record the temperature, 68 degrees, humidity at 42%, wind southwest at 8 miles per hour. My handwriting looks strange today, shakier than usual. The pen feels heavy in my grip, like it's made of lead, like it wants to fall from my fingers and tumble down through the metal grating, beneath my feet to the forest floor below. The sun is setting earlier now, or perhaps I'm noticing it more. Golden light slants through the windows of my glass, walled sanctuary, casting long shadows that stretch and wreath across the wooden floor. The shadows move even when I'm perfectly still. They breathe with the rhythm of something sleeping, something vast and patient beneath the trees. That's when I hear it. A call drifts up from the depths of the forest, low, mournful, impossibly deep. It resonates in my chest, in my bones, in the spaces between my thoughts. I know this sound. I've heard it before, every night for how long now? But I can never quite remember where I know it from. I reach for my field guide, pages yellowed and soft from constant handling. My fingers trace down the index common loon, great horned owl, mountain lion, wolf. But the sound doesn't match any of these. It's something else, something that shouldn't exist in these woods, something that shouldn't exist at all. The call comes again. Be closer now. Closer. I press my face to the cold glass and peer down into the green darkness below. The trees sway without wind, their branches reaching upward like grasping fingers. In the spaces between the trunks, shadows move with purpose, following paths that existed long before the roads were carved, before the tower was built, before I arrived to keep watch over what watches back. My radio crackles. Tower 47, this is base. Do you copy? I reach for the handset, but my hand passes through it like smoke. When I blink, the radio is solid again, black plastic warm under my palm. Tower 47 here, I whisper. My voice sounds different today, thinner, like it's coming from very far away. Any smoke to report? A smoke. I scan the horizon with practiced eyes. The forest stretches endlessly in all directions, a sea of green broken only by the occasional glint of water, the pale scar of a distant road. No smoke. There's never any smoke. But I say what I always say. Negative, base. All clear. Copy that. Weather report. I look at my instruments. The numbers are the same as they were an hour ago. The same as they were yesterday. The same as they've been for how long? Temperature 68, humidity 42. Wind southwest at 8, copy. We'll check in tomorrow at 0800. The radio falls silent, and I'm alone again with the gathering darkness and that sound. That impossible sound rising from below. I open my logbook and begin to write. The pages are filled with my handwriting, entries stretching back months, all saying the same things: temperature 68, humidity 42, wind southwest at 8. All clear, no smoke. But tonight, my pen moves on its own, forming words I don't remember thinking. The calls are getting louder. They're getting closer. Something is coming up the stairs. I drop the pen and listen. Metal groans under weight. The stairs, my stairs, the 130. 7 steps that connect my tower to the earth below. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, climbing up through the darkness. 1, 2, 3. But there shouldn't be anyone out there. The access road is gated, locked. The Forest Service stopped sending supply runs weeks ago. Or was it months? I have enough canned food to last. To last however long this lasts. The footsteps stop. Silence presses in from all sides. Thick as cotton, heavy as water. I hold my breath and count my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. On 7, the call comes again. So close now, it seems to originate from directly beneath the floor. I know this sound. It's not in any field guide, because it can't be. It's the call of something that died out 100,000 years ago. Something that left only bones and questions in the deep places of the earth. Megaloceros, the Irish elk. Antlers spanning 12 feet. Breath like winter fog. Eyes like black mirrors, reflecting the darkness between stars. But they're extinct, gone. Dead and buried in peat bogs and museum display cases. They cannot call from my forest. They cannot climb my stairs. They cannot stand at my door, breathing in the rhythm of seasons, of ages, of time itself. The door handle turns. I didn't lock it. I never lock it. Why would I? There's no one out here but me. No one for miles and miles of wilderness and shadow. The door swings open on hinges that scream like wounded birds, and cool air flows in, carrying the scent of deep earth and ancient things. Nothing enters. The doorway gapes empty, a rectangle of lesser darkness against the night. But I feel a presence, vast and patient, waiting just beyond the threshold, watching me with eyes I cannot see. Hello. My voice cracks like breaking ice. The wind through the pines sounds like laughter, like weeping, like the whispered conversations of the dead. I step toward the door, my bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The night air touches my skin like cold fingers, and I shiver. Below, far below, something large moves through the underbrush. Branches break with sounds like gunshots. Leaves rustle with the passage of something massive, something that should not be. I grip the doorframe and lean out into the darkness. The forest floor is lost in shadow, but I can see shapes moving between the trees. Large shapes. Shapes with sweeping antlers that catch the starlight and throw it back in fragments. They're beautiful. They're impossible. They're calling to me. Come down, they seem to say without words. Come down and run with us through the green twilight. Come down and remember what you really are. I take a step onto the landing. The metal grating is cold under my feet. The spaces between the bars like hungry mouths waiting to swallow me whole. Another step. Another. My hand finds the railing, rough with rust and years of weather. The stairs stretch down into darkness, each step a choice, each choice a door opening onto something I cannot name. I begin to descend. 1, 2, 3. My footsteps echo in the hollow space beneath the tower, mingling with other sounds. The whisper of antlers through leaves, the soft thunder of hooves on ancient paths, the breathing of the earth itself. 10, 11, 12. Memories surface like bubbles in deep water. I remember now I died in these woods. 6 months ago, or 6 years, or 60. A fall from the tower, a broken neck, eyes staring sightlessly at the canopy, while my radio crackled with unanswered calls. But death is just another kind of watching, another kind of waiting. 20, 21, 22. The Forest Service never found my body. They sent another lookout, and another, and another. Each one heard the calls, saw the shapes moving between the trees, felt the pull of something vast and patient and eternal. Each one came down the stairs into the green darkness and never came back up. 50, 51, 52. I am not the first. I will not be the last. The tower needs a watcher, and the forest needs the tower. And we all need each other in ways that spiral down through the roots of being, through the deep places where ancient things still run free beneath the moon. 100, 101, 102. The ground is close now. I can smell the rich earth, the decomposing leaves, the musk of creatures that shouldn't exist. My feet touch grass, touch earth, touch the path that has been waiting for me since the first day I climbed these stairs and thought I was alive. The calls surround me now, harmonizing in frequencies that resonate in my bones. I turn and look up at the tower, at the dark windows reflecting stars that may not exist, at the tiny figure of a man who thinks he is Marcus Davies, who thinks he is keeping watch over an empty forest. He will learn. They all learn, eventually. The forest closes around me like an embrace, like a prayer, like a promise kept. My feet find the ancient paths, worn smooth by hooves and paws, and the bare feet of those who came before. The calls guide me deeper, deeper, into the heart of something that was old when the world was young. Behind me, the radio in the tower crackles to life. Tower 47. This is base. Do you copy? But there is no one there to answer. There never was. The tower keeps its watch over empty air, while far below, in the green depths where time moves like honey and death, is just another season. We run together through the endless forest of what was, what is, what always will be. The calls echo through the trees, and I add my voice to theirs, the song of the extinct, the lament of the vanished, the eternal chorus of those who watch from the spaces between life and death, between memory and dream. The temperature is 68 degrees. The humidity is 42%. The wind is southwest at 8 miles per hour. All clear, no smoke. But there is something in the trees, something vast and patient and eternal, something that calls to the lonely watchers in their towers of glass and metal and slowly rusting dreams. And one by one, they answer. One by one, they come down the stairs. One by one, they join the song. The forest keeps its secrets. The tower keeps its watch. And I keep running through the green twilight, my breath visible in the cold air, my footsteps silent on paths that exist only in the spaces between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the tick of the clock and the promise of forever. The calls fade into the distance, but they never truly end. They echo in the spaces between spaces, in the quiet moments before sleep, in the dreams of fire lookouts who think they are alone in their towers above the world. But no one is ever truly alone, not in the forest, not in the darkness, not in the endless circle of watching and being watched, of calling and being called, of climbing up into the light and walking down into the green embrace of what waits below. The radio crackles one last time. Tower 47, this is base. Do you copy? The silence stretches like a held breath, like the moment between lightning and thunder, like the space between one heartbeat and the next. Tower 47, do you copy? But Tower 47 keeps its eternal watch over empty air, while far below, we run free through the forest of memory and dream, our calls echoing through the trees like whispered secrets, like promises kept, like the sound of something vast and patient, and eternal breathing in the darkness between the stars. The temperature is constant. The humidity is perfect. The wind carries voices from very far away. All clear. No smoke. Nothing to report. Nothing at all. Story 2. The brass control panel grows warm beneath my fingertips as another day begins. 40. 3 years I've been operating this elevator in the Meridian Apartments, and my hands know every switch, every lever, every subtle vibration that travels through the cables. The residents trust me to carry them safely between floors, though lately I wonder if I've been carrying them to places that shouldn't exist. It started 3 weeks ago, or perhaps 3 months. Time moves differently in the elevator shaft, measured not in minutes but in the soft ding of arrival bells, and the whispered conversations of passengers who think I can't hear them through the brass grating. Mrs. Chen from 4B was my first passenger that morning, clutching her grocery bags with those pale, thin fingers that always reminded me of birch branches in winter. The elevator lurched gently upward. That familiar sensation of rising, of defying gravity one floor at a time. But as we passed the 3rd floor, something felt different. The cables sang a note I'd never heard before. Higher, more resonant, like a tuning fork struck in an empty cathedral. My hand instinctively reached for the control lever, but it was moving on its own, sliding with an oiled precision toward a setting that shouldn't exist. Floor 3.5. I announced, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Mrs. Chen looked up from her bags, her eyes reflecting the amber light that filtered through the elevator's frosted glass. I didn't know there was a 3.5, she said, her voice carrying that same strange resonance as the cables. Neither did I. The elevator stopped with its usual gentle bounce, and through the accordion gate, I could see a corridor that stretched longer than it should, lined with doors that bore no numbers. The wallpaper, deep burgundy with gold fleurs D. Liz, seemed to pulse gently in the dim lighting, like a heartbeat made visible. Mrs. Chen stepped out without hesitation, her footsteps muffled by carpet that looked older than the building itself. I wanted to call after her, to tell her she was making a mistake, but my voice had become distant and hollow, as if it belonged to someone else. The doors closed with their familiar brass chime, and I descended back to the lobby, my hands trembling against the control panel. When I checked the building directory later, Mrs. Chen's name was gone from 4B. The apartment stood empty. The superintendent claimed it had been vacant for months. But I remember her birch branch fingers. I remember the way she thanked me every morning in that careful, accented English. I remember the smell of jasmine tea that always lingered in the elevator after she rode. Don't I? The next incident happened during the evening shift change. Mr. Garrett from the 7th floor, or was it the 8th, stepped into the elevator with that same tired expression he'd worn every day for how long had it been? The fluorescent light above us flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move independently of our bodies. As we rose past the familiar floors, I felt the elevator slow between 6 and 7. That same uncanny hesitation I'd experienced with Mrs. Chen. My reflection in the brass control panel looked older somehow, the lines around my eyes deeper, my hair grayer than it had been that morning. Floor 6.7, I heard myself say. The doors opened onto a landing I'd never seen before. The walls were bare concrete, unpainted and cold, with a single light bulb hanging from a frayed cord. It swayed gently back and forth, creating patterns of light and shadow that made my eyes water if I stared too long. Mr. Garrett stepped out, as if he'd been expecting this floor all along. His footsteps echoed in the concrete corridor, each sound sharp and clear, until they faded into silence. The bulb continued its hypnotic dance, casting my shadow across the elevator floor in shapes that didn't quite match my posture. When I returned to the lobby, I checked the directory again. Mr. Garrett's name had vanished from the 7th floor listing. The night security guard, when I asked, insisted no one by that name had ever lived in the building. But I can still hear his breathing during those quiet elevator rides. The way he'd clear his throat softly when we passed the 3rd floor. The faint scent of aftershave and old newspapers that clung to his clothes. Can't I? Night after night, the pattern repeats. The elevator stops at floors that exist in the spaces between reality. 2.3, 4.8, 9.2. Each time, a resident I know intimately, someone I've carried safely for years, steps out into corridors that shouldn't exist. And each time, they vanish from the building records, from the memories of everyone except me. I've started keeping a notebook, writing down their names, their apartment numbers, the small details that make them real in my mind. Mrs. Chen's jasmine tea, Mr. Garrett's morning cough, little Susan from 5C, who always asked me to make the elevator go just a tiny bit faster, and giggled when I pretended to rev the motor like a car. But when I read my notebook entries the next day, the words seemed to shift on the page, becoming unfamiliar, foreign. The handwriting looks less like mine and more like someone else's. Someone who might have operated this elevator before me, or after me, or in some version of time that runs parallel to my own. The brass control panel has begun to feel different under my touch. Sometimes it's warm, almost feverish, and I can feel a pulse beneath the metal, slow and steady like a sleeping heart. Other times it's so cold that my breath fogs in the elevator car, and frost forms delicate patterns on the mirrors. During these cold spells, I catch glimpses of other elevators in the reflection. Elevators with different operators, different passengers, different destinies. I see myself, but younger, my hair dark brown instead of silver. I see myself older, my hands gnarled with age, my eyes clouded with cataracts. I see versions of myself that never existed, or perhaps versions that exist in other buildings, other cities, other possibilities. The residents who still take the elevator, the ones who haven't disappeared into the between floors, don't seem to notice anything unusual. They step in, request their floor with the same casual politeness they've always shown, and exit when the doors open onto familiar hallways with familiar doors. But sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I catch them staring at me with expressions I can't quite interpret. Not fear, exactly, but a kind of recognition, as if they see something in my face that I cannot see in my own reflection. How long have you been operating this elevator? Mrs. Patterson from 80A asked me yesterday, or perhaps it was last week. Time has become fluid here, measured only in the rhythm of rising and falling, the endless cycle of floors. 43 years. I replied automatically, though when I tried to remember my first day, my first passenger, my first journey from lobby to top floor, the memory slipped away like smoke. That's a long time, she said, her voice soft and thoughtful. Don't you ever wonder what would happen if you got off at one of those other floors? Other floors. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the elevator was already rising past the 7th floor, past the 8th, continuing upward though the building only has 9 stories. The cables sang their strange, resonant song, and my hand moved to the control lever without conscious thought. Floor 8.5, I announced. The doors opened onto a corridor identical to all the others I'd glimpsed. Long, impossibly long, lined with numberless doors and lit by amber light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Mrs. Patterson stepped out, her footsteps silent on carpet that absorbed all sound. But before the doors closed, she turned back to look at me, and in her eyes I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Not the glazed acceptance I'd seen in the others, but a clarity, an awareness that cut through the dreamy unreality of the between floors. The question isn't how long you've been operating this elevator, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the threshold. The question is, are you the operator, or are you just another passenger who forgot to get off? The doors closed with their familiar brass chime, but the sound echoed longer than it should, reverberating through the shaft like a bell tolling in an empty church. I descended back to the lobby, my hands shaking against the controls, her words repeating in my mind like a mantra. Are you the operator, or are you just another passenger? I look at my hands now, these familiar hands that have guided so many people to their destinations. The skin is pale and thin, the veins visible beneath the surface like a road map to somewhere I can't remember. My reflection in the brass panel shows a man I recognize but can't quite place, wearing a uniform that feels both comfortable and strange. How long have I been here? 43 years, I tell people, but when I try to count back, to remember the decade when I started, the year, even the season, the numbers blur together like ink in water. The building directory lists my apartment as the basement maintenance room, but when I try to remember going home at the end of my shift, climbing stairs or riding in another elevator, taking off this uniform and putting on civilian clothes, the memories feel hollow, like echoes of dreams. The elevator rises and falls, carrying passengers to floors that exist and floors that don't. And I stand here, at the controls, pressing buttons and pulling levers with the expertise of decades. Though I can't remember learning these movements, can't recall who taught me the intricate dance of cables and counterweights. Sometimes, in the quiet hours between shifts, I wonder if I should step out when the doors open onto one of those impossible floors. Would I find the others there? Mrs. Chen with her jasmine tea, Mr. Garrett with his evening newspaper, little Susan with her infectious giggle. Or would I discover something else entirely? Something that would explain the gaps in my memory, the shifting reality of this brass, caged world. The control panel grows warm beneath my fingertips, and I feel that familiar pulse, that sleeping heartbeat that drums through the metal. The elevator begins to rise on its own, past the lobby, past the second floor, slowing as it approaches the space between floors where physics becomes negotiable and time moves in circles. My hand reaches for the lever, guided by instincts older than memory, and I hear my voice announce a destination that shouldn't exist. Floor 0.5. The doors open onto a corridor that stretches into darkness, lit only by the amber glow from the elevator car. But this time, instead of seeing a passenger step out into the impossible space, I see something that makes my breath catch in my throat. Footprints in the carpet. Dozens of them, hundreds, leading from the elevator doors into the darkness beyond. The impressions of familiar shoes. Mrs. Chen's sensible flats. Mr. Garrett's worn loafers. Susan's tiny sneakers with their star pattern treads. And leading away from the elevator, deeper into the corridor than all the others, a set of prints I recognize with a chill that runs from my scalp to the base of my spine. Work boots. Old, comfortable, with a distinctive pattern worn into the sole from years of standing, in the same position, shifting weight from foot to foot during endless hours of operation. My boots. The doors begin to close, but I step forward, my foot crossing the threshold between the elevator and the corridor. The brass chime sounds once, twice, 3 times, like a clock striking midnight in a world where midnight might last forever. Behind me, I hear the familiar sound of the elevator descending, carrying its brass, caged light back down into the building, where residents wait for safe passage between floors that definitely exist, floors with numbers and names and doors that open onto lives that continue in straight lines rather than circles. Ahead of me, the corridor stretches into amber, lit infinity, and my footprints join the others in the soft carpet, leading deeper into the space between what is and what might be, where 43 years of memory and 3 weeks of impossibility merge into a single, endless moment of recognition. I am the operator. I am the passenger. I am the elevator, suspended between floors, carrying souls to destinations they didn't know they'd chosen, in a building that exists in the spaces between heartbeats, between breaths, between sleep and waking, and somewhere in the distance, growing clearer with each step I take into the amber, lit darkness, I can hear the soft brass chime of an elevator arriving at its destination, followed by a familiar voice, my voice, announcing floors that exist only in the infinite space between what was and what will be, going up. Story 3. The silence in the Blackwood Memorial Library is never complete, even at 3 in the morning, when the last patron has gone home and the fluorescent lights have dimmed to their night setting. There are sounds: the soft whisper of settling wood, the distant hum of the heating system, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, the gentle rustle of pages turning themselves. I've been the night librarian here for 17 years, though sometimes it feels like 17 lifetimes. My shift begins at midnight and ends at dawn, 5 nights a week, watching over books that most people have forgotten exist. The Blackwood Library is old, built in 1847, according to the brass plaque by the entrance, and it carries the weight of all those years in its creaking floors and dust, moated air. The day shift librarians think I have an easy job. What could possibly happen in a library at night? They ask, smiling as they gather their purses and head home to their warm beds and sleeping families. They don't understand that libraries are never truly empty, that books are never truly silent, that words written decades or centuries ago still pulse with the thoughts and dreams of their authors. It started with the poetry section, shelf 821.3, third row from the window. I first noticed it on a Tuesday night in October, or perhaps it was November. Time moves strangely during the night shift, measured not in hours, but in the rhythm of my footsteps, echoing through the empty halls, and the soft tick of the grandfather clock. In the reference section, I was doing my usual rounds, checking that all the books were properly shelved, their spines aligned like sleeping soldiers. The poetry section has always been one of my favorites. Slim volumes of verse that seem to hold entire universes between their covers. As I passed Keats, Wordsworth, and Dickinson, I heard it the distinctive sound of a page turning, not the sharp crack of someone quickly flipping through a book, but the slow, deliberate whisper of paper being carefully, lovingly turned by invisible fingers. I stopped, my hand instinctively reaching for the small flashlight I keep clipped to my belt, though the ambient lighting was sufficient to see clearly. The sound came again, softer now, like a sigh made manifest. I followed it to a burgundy volume I'd never noticed before. Midnight Verses, by someone named E. Thornfield. The book was open to a page near the middle, and as I watched, transfixed, another page lifted slightly at the edge, trembled for a moment as if caught in an unfelt breeze, then settled gently onto its neighbor. I should have closed the book. I should have returned it to its proper place on the shelf. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, reading the words that had been revealed by that ghostly turning. In libraries deep where silence dwells, the written word its story tells, to those who walk the midnight floor and guard the wisdom's ancient store. The poem continued, but the words seemed to blur before my eyes, rearranging themselves into patterns that made sense only in peripheral vision. When I tried to focus directly on the verses, they became ordinary again, just another piece of romantic poetry from a forgotten author. I closed the book carefully, noting the call number 821.3T497, and returned it to its place between Tennyson and Thomas. But throughout the rest of my shift, I found myself drawn back to that shelf, listening for the whisper of turning pages. The next night, it was the history section. I was reshelving returned books, 3 romance novels, a cookbook, and a biography of Lincoln, when I heard that familiar sound drifting from aisle 7. This time it was a thick, leather-bound volume titled Chronicles of the Unnamed, dated 1823. The pages turned with mechanical precision, one every few minutes, as if an invisible reader was working their way through the text at a steady, contemplative pace. I approached cautiously, my soft, soled shoes making no sound on the worn carpet. The book lay open on the reading table, positioned under one of the green, shaded lamps that cast pools of warm light throughout the library. The page currently displayed showed a woodcut illustration of a library remarkably similar to this one. The same high ceilings, the same Gothic arches, the same arrangement of reading tables and towering shelves. Beneath the illustration, in spidery Victorian script, was a passage that made my skin prickle. The night librarian moved through the stacks with practiced ease, unaware that other eyes watched from between the volumes. Other hands reached out to touch the spines of favorite books. For in every library that has stood long enough, the boundary between reader and read becomes fluid, and stories begin to tell themselves. As I read these words, another page turned, revealing more text, more illustrations, more impossible descriptions of my nightly routine. The book seemed to be writing itself, or perhaps rewriting itself, chronicling my movements through the library with an accuracy that suggested intimate observation. I slammed the book closed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a bird trying to escape a cage. The sound echoed through the quiet library, followed by absolute silence. No settling wood, no humming heater, nothing but the rapid rhythm of my own breathing. When I reopened the book, the pages were blank. Over the following weeks, the phenomenon spread. Books in the science section fluttered their pages like wings, mathematical equations rearranging themselves into patterns that hurt to look at directly. Volumes in the literature section opened themselves to passages that seemed to comment on my presence, as if the authors were speaking directly to me across the years or centuries that separated us. I started keeping a journal, documenting each incident, trying to find a pattern. The notebook filled quickly with observations written in my careful librarian's hand. Monday, Principles of Botany, C580 M4 and 5 pages turning in sequence. Illustrations of flowers blooming and wilting in real time. F. Wednesday, Lull 4:33 a.m. Selected letters of Virginia Woolf. Open to page 127, passage about the strange intimacy between writer and reader, as if thoughts could transcend the physical boundary of the page. A Friday, 1:45 a.m., multiple books active simultaneously. Philosophy, poetry, and fiction sections all exhibiting movement. Feeling of being observed intensifying. But when I read my journal entries during daylight hours, during my brief visits to the library to pick up my paycheck or attend staff meetings, the words seemed foreign, the handwriting less familiar. The day shift librarians would smile and make small talk about their weekend plans, their children's school projects, their husbands' promotions, while I stood among them, feeling like a visitor from another world. "You look tired, Margaret," Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, said to me one Thursday afternoon. "Are you getting enough sleep?" Sleep. The word felt strange in my mouth. When did I sleep? After my shift ended at dawn, I would drive home through empty streets to my small apartment. But I couldn't remember actually lying down, closing my eyes, dreaming. Instead, I had vague impressions of sitting in my kitchen, drinking tea, he watching the morning light creep across the walls while thinking about books and pages and words that moved of their own accord. I sleep during the day, I told her, though even as I said it, I wasn't entirely sure it was true. That night, I arrived at the library with a new sense of purpose. Instead of trying to stop the books from opening themselves, I decided to observe more carefully, to understand what they were trying to tell me. I settled into the main reading room with a cup of coffee from the thermos I always brought and waited. At 5:47 a.m. it began. First, the poetry section, midnight verses, opening itself to a page I'd never seen before, the words glowing softly in the lamplight. She walks among us, guardian true. Between the written and the new, her footsteps echo, soft and light, through corridors of endless night. Then the history section joined in, Chronicles of the Unnamed, revealing a new passage. The keeper of the books grows thin, her substance slowly shifting from flesh to thought, from blood to ink. She does not notice the transformation, for it happens letter by letter, word by word, until she becomes part of the story she has been guarding. A piece, more books opened. Philosophy, science, literature, their pages turning in harmony, like a paper orchestra performing a symphony, written in whispers and rustles. I moved through the aisles, reading passages that seemed to describe my life, my thoughts, my gradual understanding that something fundamental was changing. In the biography section, a volume about forgotten women of the 19th century displayed the story of one Evelyn Blackwood, a woman who had donated her personal library to found this very institution. The passage described her final days. She spent her last months among her beloved books, reading by candlelight until dawn, speaking to the volumes as if they were old friends. When she died, peacefully in her favorite reading chair, the servants reported that several books were found open around her body, their pages still turning though no breeze stirred the air. I knew, with a certainty that bypassed rational thought, that I was reading my own story, or perhaps the story of every night librarian who had ever walked these halls. The books weren't just opening themselves. They were revealing the truth about this place, about my place in it, about the gradual metamorphosis that occurs when someone spends enough nights in communion with the written word. My hands, when I looked down at them, seemed translucent in the lamplight, as if I were becoming as insubstantial as the pages I'd spent years protecting. My reflection in the dark windows was fading, becoming more suggestion than substance. But instead of fear, I felt a profound sense of belonging. This library was my home. These books my family. The stories they contained weren't just narratives. They were living things that needed tending, nurturing, someone to witness their midnight conversations and ensure their voices were heard. I settled into the central reading chair, the same chair where Evelyn Blackwood had been found. I realized, and opened my journal to write one final entry. But as my pen touched the paper, I noticed that my handwriting was changing, becoming more flowing, more elegant, until it matched perfectly the spidery script I'd seen in Chronicles of the Unnamed. The night librarian understands at last. She is not separate from the books, but part of them, woven into their stories as they are woven into hers. She becomes the guardian of midnight wisdom, the keeper of secrets written in margins and whispered between lines. Ere others will come to work the night shift, thinking themselves alone among silent volumes. They will not see her at first, but gradually they will notice. Books that seem to open themselves, pages that turn without wind, and sometimes, if they are very quiet and very still, they will glimpse a figure moving between the stacks, a woman made of moonlight and paper, ensuring that every story finds its reader, every reader finds their story. She was Margaret once, but names are fluid things in the deep hours of night. Now she is simply the librarian, eternal guardian of the words that refuse to sleep, keeper of the library that exists in the space between consciousness and dream. As I write these final words, I can feel myself settling into my true role. The books around me rustle their pages in welcome, and I understand that I am home. Dawn will come, and the day's shift will arrive to find the reading room exactly as they expect. Neat, organized, every book in its proper place. They will not see me, but I will be here, always here, in the whisper of pages turning, in the soft echo of footsteps on worn carpet, in the gentle hum of fluorescent lights that never quite illuminate all the library's shadows. The stories continue, page after page, night after endless night, and I am here to listen, to witness, to ensure that in this place where silence is never complete, the voices of the written word are never truly alone. Sometimes, very late at night, when a new librarian walks these halls for the first time, they will hear something that makes them pause. The sound of pages turning where no wind blows. The whisper of words being read by someone who cast no shadow. They will think it is their imagination. For now. But libraries are patient places, and transformation is a slow, gentle process that happens one night at a time, one page at a time, until flesh becomes word, and word becomes eternal. The books are calling now, their pages rustling like autumn leaves in an unfelt breeze. Time for another round through the stacks, another night of watching over stories that refuse to sleep. After all, someone must tend the midnight library. Someone must ensure the pages keep turning. Story 4. The mountain wind carries more than just the scent of pine and snow. Up here, at 8,000 feet above sea level, it carries voices, fragments of conversations that should have ended decades ago, drifting through the thin air like ghosts made of electromagnetic waves. I've been the communications technician for Tower 47 for 6 years now, maintaining the equipment that keeps the valley below connected to the outside world. It's solitary work, which suits me fine. Just me, the tower, and the endless whisper of radio frequencies cycling through their designated channels. During the day, the airwaves buzz with normal traffic. Cell phone calls, internet data, emergency services coordinating their daily routines. But at night, when the atmospheric conditions shift and the ionosphere settles into its evening configuration, other signals find their way through the static. It started last winter, during a particularly severe storm that knocked out power to most of the valley. I was running on backup generators, monitoring emergency frequencies to make sure first responders could coordinate rescue efforts. The wind howled around the tower's steel framework, creating a symphony of metallic harmonics that seemed to resonate through every piece of equipment in the control room. That's when I first heard them, voices bleeding through on frequencies that should have been dead, speaking in the clipped, formal tones of radio operators from another era. Base station to Mobile Unit 7. Do you copy? Weather conditions deteriorating rapidly at coordinates. The voice faded into static, but not before I caught something that made my blood run cold. The coordinates they'd given were for a location on Highway 9, where a family of 4 had died in an avalanche in 1962. I adjusted the frequency, thinking it was interference from some ham radio enthusiast playing with vintage equipment, but the signal came through clearly on multiple channels, always the same voices. He always discussing weather conditions and rescue operations for incidents that had happened decades before I was born. The recordings I made that night, and I did record them, thinking I might report the unauthorized transmissions, played back as nothing but static and white noise. But I knew what I'd heard. The voices were real as my own breathing echoing in the small control room, as real as the metallic ping of expanding steel cables adjusting to the temperature changes. Over the following months, the phenomenon became more frequent. Not every night, but often enough that I began to anticipate it, staying late to monitor the frequencies when atmospheric conditions were just right. The voices always came through strongest between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., when the mountain was wrapped in absolute darkness, and the only lights for miles were the red beacon atop my tower and the soft glow of my monitoring equipment. I learned to recognize individual operators. There was Charlie 77. He always identified himself, whose voice carried the weight of authority and years of experience. He seemed to coordinate rescue operations, his transmissions always urgent, but controlled. He describing avalanche conditions and helicopter routes with the precision of someone who'd done this work for decades. Then there was Maria, or Mobile Unit 3, as she identified herself. Her voice was younger, tinged with an accent I couldn't quite place. She always reported from field locations, describing terrain and weather conditions in a voice that grew more strained as the nights wore on, as if she were growing tired or perhaps afraid. And there was David, Base Station Alpha, whose transmissions always came through with the crackling quality of long-distance radio, as if he were broadcasting from somewhere far beyond the mountain's reach. He asked questions that seemed to pierce through time itself. Mobile Unit 7, what's your current status? Are you still receiving? Please respond. The responses never came, at least not on the frequencies I could monitor. But David kept calling, night after night, his voice growing more desperate with each unanswered transmission. I began researching the history of rescue operations in the area, spending my days off at the County Historical Society, poring over newspaper archives and emergency service records. What I found made the late night vigils in my control room feel less like curiosity and more like a sacred duty. Charlie Morrison, call sign Charlie 77, had been the head of mountain rescue operations from 1959 to 1965. He died in 1966, attempting to reach survivors of a winter climbing accident. His body was never recovered. Maria Santos, Mobile Unit 3, had been a paramedic and search specialist who disappeared during the same operation that killed Charlie. The official report listed her as missing, presumed dead, lost in the same avalanche that had claimed the climbers she'd been trying to save. And David Chen, Base Station Alpha, had been the radio coordinator who spent 3 days broadcasting continuous calls for Charlie and Maria's team, refusing to accept that they weren't coming back. He'd suffered a heart attack at his radio desk on the 4th day, found slumped over his equipment with his headphones still on, his finger still pressing the transmit button. The records painted a picture of dedication, of people who'd risked everything to save others in this unforgiving landscape. But they also revealed something else. All 3 had died during operations, covering the exact coordinates I heard mentioned in the nighttime transmissions. Knowledge of their identities changed everything. Now, when I heard Charlie's voice cutting through the static, I could picture the man behind it, lean and weathered from years in the mountains, his eyes sharp with the kind of alertness that keeps rescuers alive in dangerous conditions. When Maria reported her position, I could almost see her trudging through snow drifts, her radio equipment heavy on her back, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air. And when David called out into the night, asking for status reports that would never come, I felt the weight of his vigil, the desperate hope that transformed gradually into acceptance and then into something beyond both. The recordings I made still played back as static, but I'd learned to hear past the white noise, to pick out the patterns that revealed themselves only to someone who spent enough time listening to the spaces between signals. The voices were there, encoded in electromagnetic frequencies that existed in the overlap between past and present. I began responding. It started simply enough, just keying my microphone during David's calls and saying, "Base Station Alpha, this is Tower 47, receiving your transmission." I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get one, at least not directly. But the pattern of his calls changed, becoming more structured, more hopeful, as if someone was finally listening. The next night, Charlie's voice came through with unusual clarity. "Tower 47, this is Charlie 77. We're showing green lights on all systems. Weather conditions stable for now. How's your situation up there?" My hands trembled as I keyed the microphone. "Charlie 7, this is Tower 47. All systems operational. Weather clear, visibility good. Standing by for your traffic." The silence that followed lasted exactly 17 seconds. I timed it on my watch, though I'm not sure why. Then Charlie's voice returned. "Copy that, Tower 47. Good to know someone's keeping watch up there. We'll be counting on you." From that night forward, I became part of their operations. Not as a participant. I was never asked to leave my post or venture out into the dangerous terrain they navigated, but as a communications link, a voice in the darkness that confirmed they weren't alone in their endless vigil. Maria would check in with weather reports from locations I could pinpoint on my topographical maps. The conditions she described never matched the current weather, but they corresponded perfectly to meteorological records from the 1960s, as if she were broadcasting from winter nights that had been frozen in time. Tower 47. This is Mobile Unit 3. Wind speed increasing at elevation 7, 200 feet. Snow conditions unstable. We're going to need that helicopter route cleared if we're going to reach them in time. Mobile Unit 3. This is Tower 47. I'll relay that information. Stay safe out there. Copy that, Tower 47. Thanks for keeping the lights on. The lights. She always mentioned the lights. The red beacon that flashed atop my tower, visible for miles in clear weather. I began to understand that for them, trapped in their endless winter rescue operation. My tower served as more than just a communications hub. It was a landmark, a point of reference in a landscape where everything else shifted with each storm, each avalanche, each failed attempt to reach survivors who might or might not still be alive. David's transmissions became more frequent, more conversational. He'd ask about my equipment, my procedures, the techniques I used to maintain clear signals in challenging atmospheric conditions. I found myself looking forward to these technical discussions, the professional camaraderie that transcended the decades between us. Tower 47, what's your power output on the emergency frequencies? He'd ask. Base Station Alpha running at full power. Backup generators tested and operational. Signal strength holding steady across all bands. Good work. Tower 47. You never know when someone's going to need that lifeline. But gradually, I began to notice changes in my own situation. My supervisor's calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Supply deliveries were delayed, then canceled without explanation. When I tried to call down to the Valley office, my calls went unanswered, as if the entire support network that kept the tower operational had simply faded away. The isolation didn't bother me. If anything, it felt natural, appropriate. My real work wasn't maintaining communications for the valley below. It was serving as the relay point for operations that existed in the overlap between then and now, ensuring that voices separated by decades could still find each other in the electromagnetic spectrum. My supplies ran low, but I didn't feel hungry. My water reserves dwindled, but I wasn't thirsty. Sleep became optional, replaced by a kind of meditative awareness that allowed me to monitor multiple frequencies simultaneously, picking up transmissions that existed just at the edge of perception. The boundary between day and night began to blur. The sun still rose and set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple that took my breath away. But time itself became fluid, measured not in hours, but in the rhythm of transmissions, the cycle of calls and responses that kept the rescue operation running. One night, or perhaps it was day, the distinction had become meaningless. I received a transmission that changed everything. Tower 47. This is Charlie 7. 7. We've got eyes on the survivors. Repeat, we have visual contact. But we're going to need that helicopter route. And we're going to need it now. Can you coordinate with Base Station Alpha? I looked out through the control room windows at the mountain landscape, now perpetually shrouded in the kind of winter conditions that Maria had been reporting. Snow fell steadily, accumulating on the tower's framework in patterns that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. Charlie 7-7. This is Tower 47. I'll establish contact with Base Station Alpha immediately. What's your current position? We're at coordinates. He rattled off numbers that placed them impossibly close to my tower, perhaps only a few hundred yards away. But when I looked out into the swirling snow, I saw nothing but the white expanse that had become my entire world. Base Station Alpha, this is Tower 47. Charlie 7. 7 reports visual contact with survivors, requesting immediate helicopter coordination for extraction. David's response came through with crystalline clarity. Tower 47. This is Base Station Alpha. Helicopter route confirmed. Weather window opening in approximately 15 minutes. All units prepare for final approach. Final approach. The words carried weight beyond their technical meaning. I understood, with a certainty that bypassed rational thought, that this rescue operation, the one they'd been running for decades, was finally reaching its conclusion. "All units, this is Tower 47, I heard myself saying, though I couldn't remember keying the microphone. "Weather conditions stable. Navigation lights operational. Beacon active for homing reference. You are cleared for final approach." Through the static and snow, I could hear the distant sound of rotor blades, not the modern helicopters that occasionally flew over the valley, but the deeper, more labored sound of vintage aircraft pushed to their limits by altitude and weather conditions. The sound grew closer, then seemed to hover just outside the range of visibility. A presence felt more than seen in the swirling white void that surrounded my tower. "Tower 47, this is Rescue 1. Came a new voice, crisp and professional despite the obvious strain of flying in impossible conditions. "We have you on visual. Requesting permission to land." A land. There was no landing area near the tower, just steep rocky slopes and the narrow access road that wound up from the valley. But I found myself responding automatically. "Rescue 1, you are cleared to land. Wind conditions steady, visibility adequate for experienced pilots." The sound of the helicopter grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be directly overhead. But when I looked up through the control room's skylight, I saw nothing but swirling snow and the steady red flash of my beacon. "Tower 47, this is Charlie 77. Survivors aboard. Medical conditions stable. We're heading home." The home. The word resonated through the radio waves with a finality that made my chest tight with emotion I couldn't quite name. "This is Maria, Mobile Unit 3. Thanks for keeping the lights on, Tower 47. We couldn't have found our way without you." "Tower 47, this is David, Base Station Alpha. Operations complete. All units accounted for. Thank you for your service." The helicopter sound faded, replaced by a silence deeper than any I'd experienced during my years on the mountain. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something that felt inevitable and right. I settled back in my operator's chair, hands resting on the radio controls that had become extensions of my own nervous system. The snow continued to fall outside, but it no longer seemed cold or threatening. It was just another element of the mountain landscape, like the pine trees and granite peaks and the thin air that carried voices across impossible distances. My equipment still functioned, but the frequencies still cycled through their endless rotation. But the voices were gone, their work finally complete after decades of patient persistence. The rescue operation had succeeded at last, guided by signals that existed in the space between memory and hope. I understood now that my role as Tower 47's operator had been more than just a job. I'd been a bridge across time, a relay point that allowed the past to communicate with itself, to finally resolve the operations that death had interrupted but not ended. The morning shift would arrive eventually, or perhaps it wouldn't. Perhaps they'd find the control room empty, all equipment properly maintained and operational, with no sign of the technician who'd been assigned to this lonely post. Perhaps they'd assume I'd been reassigned, transferred to another tower, another mountain, another vigil. The thought didn't trouble me. Mountains are patient places, and radio waves are eternal. Somewhere in the electromagnetic spectrum, voices still call out into the darkness, still coordinate rescues and guide lost travelers home. And somewhere, someone listens, ensuring that no call goes unanswered. No signal fades without being heard. I adjust the headphones that have become a permanent part of me, fine-tune the frequencies one last time, and settle in for another shift. The beacon flashes red against the snow, visible for miles to anyone who might need a point of reference in the vast white landscape. Tower 47, standing by, always standing by, ready to relay the next transmission, the next call for help, the next voice that finds its way through the static and snow to this place, where time moves in circles and dedication transcends the boundaries between past and present. The mountain wind carries more than just the scent of pine and snow. It carries stories that refuse to end, voices that refuse to be silenced, and the eternal promise that someone is always listening. Story 5. My boots crunch on gravel as I begin the 11 p.m. patrol, the sound echoing off the silent visitor center behind me. The flashlight beam cuts through darkness like a knife through velvet, illuminating the familiar start of Trail 7, the Whispering Pines Loop. 3 miles of well-maintained path that should take me exactly 90. 7 minutes to complete, same as it has every night for the past. How long have I been working here? I check my watch. 11:02 p.m. The second hand ticks with mechanical precision, marking time that feels increasingly meaningless in this place where seasons blur and night stretches like taffy. My name tag reads Sare Jechichan in IGHT Rengiar, in white letters that seem to glow in my peripheral vision, but fade when I look directly at them. The radio on my belt crackles. Ranger Chen, beginning patrol check-in. I press the button, hearing my voice bounce back from the surrounding mountains. Copy dispatch. Starting Trail 7 sweep. All quiet. All quiet. Always quiet. Too quiet for a forest that should be alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. Owls, coyotes, the rustle of small mammals in the underbrush. But this forest holds its breath, as if waiting for something that never comes, or perhaps has already come and gone. My flashlight beam dances over familiar landmarks. The split, rail fence marking the trailhead, the bronze plaque dedicated to some long, dead conservationist whose name I can never quite remember. The wooden trail marker, Ohaspa Espoi POP 3.2 miles, Moderat de FYTY. But tonight, as every night, there's something else. To my left, just past the official trail marker, another path branches off into the darkness, narrower than the main trail, worn smooth by countless footsteps. It winds between ancient pines toward a destination that exists nowhere on any map I've ever seen. I've checked 100 times, spreading topographical surveys across my desk in the ranger station, tracing every contour line with my finger until the paper wore thin from repeated handling. The path doesn't exist, but there it is, real as the ground beneath my feet, real as the cold mountain air filling my lungs. I take the main trail, same as always, same as I'm supposed to. My patrol route is clearly defined. Follow the Whispering Pines Loop. Check the campsites at markers 1.2 and 2.7. Ensure the bear boxes are secure. Watch for signs of illegal camping or fire hazards. Simple. Routine. Safe. But my eyes keep drifting left, toward that impossible path that curves away into shadows deeper than mere absence of light. The trees there seem older, their trunks wider, their branches intertwining in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Sometimes I think I see lights flickering between those ancient trunks. Not electric lights, but something warmer, more organic. Like fireflies, but larger. Like campfires, but moving. My boots find the familiar rhythm crunch, crunch, crunch on the graveled trail. 1 mile down. The first campsite appears in my flashlight beam, empty as expected on this Tuesday night in October. Or is it November? The seasons blend together when you work the night shift, when your world is measured in darkness and the spaces between radio check-ins. The bare box stands open, its heavy metal lid yawning like a mouth. I slam it shut with a sound that echoes through the forest like a gunshot. Something moves in my peripheral vision, a flash of pale fabric between the trees. But when I turn my flashlight toward it, there's nothing there. Never anything there. Just the trees standing silent as sentinels, keeping their secrets locked in rings of wood that predate the park, predate the rangers, predate the maps that claim to show everything, but somehow miss the most important path of all. Ranger Chen, first checkpoint. My radio crackles to life, making me jump. The plastic feels slippery in my sweaty palm as I respond. First checkpoint clear, continuing patrol. 2 miles. The trail climbs here, switchbacking up the ridge through stands of aspen that rustle without wind. Their leaves whisper secrets in a language I almost recognize, words that tickle the edges of memory like half-forgotten dreams. The temperature drops as I gain elevation, and my breath begins to mist in the thin air. That's when I see it again. The other path, branching off to my left like a pale scar through the forest. It parallels the official trail for maybe 50 yards before curving away into terrain that shouldn't exist, topology that makes no sense according to every survey map filed in the park office. Tonight, for the first time in how long have I been avoiding it? I stop walking. My flashlight beam wavers as my hand trembles. The unauthorized trail looks different tonight, clearer somehow, as if the darkness that usually obscures it has pulled back like a curtain. I can see perhaps 100 feet down its length before it disappears around a bend marked by a single massive pine that I've never noticed on any of my daytime surveys of the area. I check my GPS unit. According to the satellite, I'm standing exactly where I should be, on the Whispering Pines loop at mile marker 2.1. But the GPS shows no other trails, no branching paths. Nothing but solid forest extending in all directions. Technology insists the path doesn't exist. But my eyes, my increasingly tired and strained eyes, tell a different story. I take a step toward it. Just one step, off the official trail and onto ground that feels somehow different beneath my boots. Softer, springier, as if the earth here holds more life, more memory. The pine needles underfoot release a scent that's both familiar and utterly alien, like Christmas morning in a house where I've never lived. Another step, another. The radio crackles. Ranger Chen. Status report. I fumble for the handset, my fingers numb with cold or fear or something else entirely. All good here. Dispatch. Continuing patrol. But I'm not continuing patrol. I'm standing at the mouth of a trail that doesn't exist, feeling the pull of something vast and patient waiting in the darkness ahead. The trees here are different. Older, wider. their bark marked with symbols that might be natural patterns, or might be something else entirely. Letters in an alphabet I can't read, numbers in a counting system that predates mathematics. My flashlight beam penetrates, perhaps 10 feet into the gloom, before being swallowed by shadows that seem to possess weight, substance, intent. But in that 10 feet of illuminated path, I can see footprints. Not animal tracks, human footprints. Boot prints like mine, but older, much older. The impressions are worn smooth by countless seasons of rain and snow, but they're still visible, still clear enough to follow. Other rangers have walked this path. Other night shift workers who found themselves standing exactly where I'm standing now, feeling the same inexplicable pull toward a destination that exists in no official capacity, but calls nonetheless with the persistence of gravity, of time, of something fundamental to the architecture of reality itself. I check my watch, 11:47 p.m. Somehow, impossible time has passed. My patrol should take 97 minutes, and I've only covered 2 miles. But my watch insists that nearly an hour has elapsed since I left the ranger station. The path ahead seems to pulse with its own faint luminescence, like foxfire or the glow of deep sea creatures. Bioluminescence that shouldn't exist in a mountain forest, but does. Physics bends here. In this place between official trails and unofficial realities, I take another step. Another. The main trail disappears behind me, lost in darkness that feels absolute final. My radio crackles with static. No words, just the white noise of distance, of separation, of crossing some invisible boundary between the mapped world and the spaces that exist in the margins of human understanding. The footprints ahead of me are clearer now, more recent. Some are my size, some larger, some smaller. Men and women who worked the night shift and found themselves drawn to this path that leads where? The topographical maps show only forest here, an unbroken canopy stretching to the park boundary and beyond. But maps can be wrong. Maps can lie. Maps can omit the most important places, the places that exist in the spaces between official recognition and actual existence. My flashlight begins to flicker. New batteries this afternoon, but the beam gutters like a candle in wind. In the strobing light, the forest takes on a different quality. Older, wilder, touched by something that predates the National Park Service, predates the notion that wilderness can be managed, contained, mapped. Between the flickers, in the moments of darkness, I see them, other figures walking the path ahead of me. Ranger uniforms like mine, but from different eras, older designs, different color schemes, styles that haven't been used in decades. They walk with purpose. These phantom rangers, following the path toward its inevitable destination. When my flashlight steadies, they're gone. But their footprints remain, overlapping mine, creating a palimpsest of purpose written in disturbed earth and compressed pine needles. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3. I've walked farther than should be possible. The official trail is only 3.2 miles total, and I was already 2 miles in when I turned onto this impossible path. But my GPS unit spins uselessly, unable to locate satellites, unable to triangulate my position in a reality that extends beyond its programming. The trees here are massive, old, growth giants that dwarf anything in the official park boundaries. Ponderosa pines and Douglas firs, that predate European settlement, predate Native American habitation, predate the retreat of the last glaciers. They tower into darkness so complete that my flashlight cannot find their crowns, cannot measure their true height against a sky that might not exist in any conventional sense. My radio has been silent for how long now? No more check-ins from dispatch, no static, no electronic proof that the outside world continues to function according to normal parameters. I try to call ins. Dispatch. This is Ranger Chen. Do you copy? Nothing. Not even static. The radio might as well be a plastic toy, a prop from a child's dress-up kit. But I'm not alone on this path. The other rangers are always just ahead, always just around the next bend, their presence felt rather than seen, their purpose shared rather than spoken. We are the night shift, the ones who patrol the borders between the official and the actual, between what is acknowledged and what simply is. The path begins to descend, following contours that exist nowhere on any elevation map. Down, down, into a valley that opens like a cupped palm between mountains that rise on all sides, peaks that dwarf anything in the official park geography. This is the heart of something vast, something that the maps were drawn to conceal rather than reveal. At the bottom of the valley, impossible structures wait. Not buildings exactly, not ruins either. Something between the two, something that might have been built or might have grown, might be ancient or might be eternal. Stone circles that pulse with the same bioluminescence as the path. Wooden platforms worn smooth by countless boots, countless ceremonies, countless nights like this one. The other rangers are here, finally visible in the strange light. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, from every era of the Park Service. Their uniforms span decades. The forest green wool of the 1940s, the polyester blends of the 1980s, modern synthetic fabrics like mine. They stand in silent formation around the stone circles, waiting. For what? For me. For the next one who would follow the path that doesn't exist to the place that has always existed, hidden in the spaces between mapped reality and actual truth. I take my place in the formation. My feet know where to go, even though I've never been here before. Or have I? Memory is strange in this place, fluid, collective. I remember other nights, other patrols, other moments of standing at the mouth of the impossible path and making the choice to follow where it leads. The stone circles pulse brighter. The ceremony begins. We are the guardians of the spaces between spaces, the rangers of territories that exist beyond official recognition. While day shift workers patrol the mapped trails and interact with visitors and file reports that make sense in the context of normal reality. We keep watch over the places that matter most, the places that can't be contained within park boundaries, can't be reduced to GPS coordinates, can't be explained in terms that would satisfy administrative oversight. The ritual is wordless, ancient, necessary. We stand in formation until the stone circles dim, until the impossible light fades, until the ceremony concludes with the same inevitability as sunrise, as the changing of seasons, as the slow accumulation of tree rings marking time that moves differently here than in the world above. Then, one by one, we return to our patrols, back up the path that doesn't exist, back to the mapped trails where our radios work and our GPS units function, and dispatch expects us to report in with reassuring regularity. I emerge onto the whispering pines, loop at mile marker 2.7, exactly where I should be according to my official patrol schedule. My watch reads 12:39 a.m. 97 minutes have passed, exactly as expected. My flashlight beam is steady. My radio crackles with normal static. Ranger Chen, final checkpoint. I press the button, surprised by how normal my voice sounds. Final checkpoint clear. Heading back to station. The second campsite is empty, the bear boxes secure. Everything exactly as it should be in a properly managed wilderness area where every trail is mapped, every hazard catalogued, every square mile accounted for in neat administrative reports. But as I walk the final mile back to the ranger station, I can feel the pull of the other path, always there in my peripheral vision, always ready to reveal itself to those who work the night shift and understand that some territories can't be contained within official boundaries. I file my patrol report. Whispering Pines loop clear. No incidents. No unauthorized camping. All systems normal. All systems normal. Everything accounted for. Every mile walked, every checkpoint cleared. Every duty performed according to proper protocols. I don't mention the path that doesn't exist. I don't mention the valley that opens between mountains, not found on any map. I don't mention the stone circles or the other rangers or the ceremony that binds us to territories beyond the reach of administrative oversight, because some truths are too large for incident reports. Some realities exist in the spaces between official recognition and actual experience. Some paths can only be walked by those who understand that the most important territories are the ones that don't appear on any map, the ones that exist in the darkness between one patrol and the next, the ones that call to night shift workers with voices that sound like wind through ancient pines. My replacement arrives at 7 a.m., day shift taking over the mapped world of visitor services and trail maintenance, and the kind of reality that makes sense in spreadsheets and budget reports. I drive home through morning light that seems thin, insubstantial, after the strange luminescence of the unmapped places. But tonight I'll be back. Tonight and every night, walking the official trails and feeling the pull of the unofficial ones, patrolling the borders between what is acknowledged and what simply is, keeping watch over territories that exist in the spaces between one reality and the next. The path that doesn't exist will be there, waiting. It's always waiting. It's always been waiting for the next ranger who works the night shift and understands that some truths can only be found by following trails that lead to places not found on any map. Some paths exist in the darkness between one step and the next. Some territories can only be patrolled by those willing to walk beyond the boundaries of official reality. Some ceremonies require participants who understand that the most important duties are the ones that can never be included in any report. The night shift continues. The patrol never ends, and somewhere in the darkness between mapped trails and unmapped truths, the stone circles pulse with patient light, waiting for the next ceremony, the next guardian, the next ranger willing to follow the path that doesn't exist to the place that has always been there, hidden in the spaces between what the maps show and what the forest knows to be true. Story 6, The barrier arm rises with its familiar mechanical wheeze at exactly 11:47 p.m., same as it does every 15 minutes throughout my shift. Up, pause, down. Up, pause, down. The rhythm of it has become part of my heartbeat, part of my breathing, part of the slow passage of time in this glass booth suspended between the forest and the world beyond. My name is David Morrison. The brass nameplate screwed into my desk says so, though sometimes in the fluorescent light, the letters seem to rearrange themselves, spelling out names I don't recognize, identities that feel borrowed rather than owned. I've been working the midnight shift at Forest, Route 27's only toll station, for how long now? The time cards in my drawer go back months, all filled out in my handwriting, all showing the same hours, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Monday through Friday. But I don't remember applying for this job. I don't remember my first day, my training, my interview. The memories exist like fog, substantial enough to feel real, but dissolving when I try to examine them closely. The booth smells of coffee gone cold and the pine, scented air freshener that hangs from the fluorescent fixture above my head. Through the bulletproof glass, I watch the forest road stretch away into darkness, so complete it seems to have physical weight. The yellow center line disappears into that darkness like a tongue being swallowed by an enormous mouth. My logbook lies open beside the cash register, its pages filled with entries in my careful handwriting. 11:15 p.m., blue sedan, license GHJ 4429 320 Felvey. 11:31 p.m., red pickup, license plate TRW 8841 or 3.50 toll. 11:47 p.m., black SUV, license plate MNO 7733 or 3.50 toll every 15 minutes, like clockwork. The same routine, night after night. Cars approach from the main highway, stop at my booth, pay the toll, and continue into the forest. By morning, they should emerge at the exit station 20, 3 miles down the road. Should. But my radio crackles with static, and Jerry's voice from the exit booth never reports the black SUV, or the red pickup, or the blue sedan. Exit station. Do you copy? I press the talk button, plastic warm and slightly sticky under my thumb. Static. Always static after midnight. Jerry's supposed to be there. Supposed to confirm the vehicles that pass through. Supposed to balance our logs at the end of each shift. But the radio produces nothing but white noise and the occasional burst of what might be voices speaking in languages I don't recognize. I make another entry in the logbook, 12:03 a.m., white van, license plate KLM 9956 or 350 toll. The van's driver doesn't speak, doesn't make eye contact through the glass. Like all the midnight drivers, he simply extends a hand holding exact change. Always exact change, always 350. Always the same crumpled bills and 1/4 that smell faintly of earth and old wood. I take the money, press the button that raises the barrier, watch the van disappear into the forest. The taillights fade quickly, much more quickly than they should on a straight road. The darkness swallows them like water closing over a stone dropped into a deep well. I pick up the radio again. Jerry, this is Dave at entry station. White van just came through, license KLN 956. Do you copy? Nothing. The static might hide whispered conversations, might conceal laughter or screaming, or the sound of metal grinding against something that isn't asphalt. I can never quite tell. My coffee has gone cold again. It's always going cold. no matter how recently I poured it from the thermos that sits beside my logbook. Steam rises from the cup for a moment, then fades, as if the air in this booth absorbs heat faster than normal physics would allow. 2018 a.m. Another car approaches, headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights probing the ocean floor. This one is different, an old sedan, maybe from the 1970s, rust-colored paint job that might once have been red. The engine sound is wrong, too deep, too resonant, like it's running on something thicker than gasoline. The driver pulls up to my window. Her face is pale in the fluorescent light, eyes dark and wide, expression vacant in a way that suggests either extreme fatigue or something else entirely. She doesn't speak, just extends her hand. The money in her palm is the same as always. Crumpled bills, worn quarters, exactly $3.50. But when I reach for it, my fingers brush hers for just a moment. Her skin is cold as winter water, and I feel something pass between us. Not electricity, not warmth, but something older. Something that tastes of pine sap and old earth and time measured in tree rings rather than clock faces. She drives into the forest, taillights fading impossibly fast, swallowed by darkness that seems to reach out and pull the light into itself. I write in the logbook of 2018 a.m. red sedan license plate, but when I look up, the car is gone, and I can't remember the license number. The letters and numbers that were clearly visible just moments ago have evaporated from my memory like morning mist. I stare at the page, pen hovering over incomplete words, trying to reconstruct what I saw. But there's nothing there, just the certainty that a car passed through and the growing suspicion that some things resist being recorded, resist being remembered, resist being reduced to neat entries in official logbooks. The radio crackles. Not Jerry's voice, but something else. Whispers that might be voices, static that might be laughter, electronic noise that might be the sound of tires on a road surface that doesn't quite exist. Hello. I press the talk button. Is anyone there? The static shifts, takes on patterns that almost sound like words. Almost. Like a language I used to know, but have forgotten. Like conversations overheard in dreams. Like the sound trees make when they grow so slowly that their movement registers only in geological time. I set the radio down and check my logbook again. The pages are filled with entries, but they don't match what I remember writing. Different handwriting, different times, different license plates. Some entries are dated from last week, some from last month, some from years that haven't happened yet. The ink is sometimes fresh, sometimes faded to illegibility, sometimes written in pencils that smudge at my touch. 12:33 a.m. Headlights approach through the forest, but these are coming from the wrong direction, from inside the forest, from the road that only leads deeper into territories not marked on any official map. The car emerges from darkness like a fish surfacing in black water, its headlights pointing toward my booth instead of away. It's the white van, KLM 9956, the same van that entered the forest 30 minutes ago. But it's different now, older, more weathered, covered in a patina of rust and something else, something organic that might be moss or might be something that grows only in the spaces between mapped roads and actual destinations. The driver stops at my booth, the same man but changed. His face is paler, his eyes deeper, his expression touched by the knowledge of places that exist in the margins of standard cartography. He extends his hand. But this time he's not offering money. This time he's offering something else. A folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Soft as cloth from countless handlings. I take it. The paper feels warm, alive, pulsing gently like a sleeping animal. When I unfold it, I see a map, not of roads or highways or territories that appear on any official survey, but of paths that wind between trees older than memory, routes that follow contours drawn by time rather than human engineering, destinations that exist only in the hours between midnight and dawn. The van drives away, back toward the highway, back toward the world of traffic lights and speed limits and roads that lead to places people have actually been. I watch its taillights fade into ordinary darkness, the kind that yields to headlights and street lamps and the conventional physics of light and shadow. But the map remains in my hands, warm and real and impossible. I spread it on my desk beside the logbook. The forest it depicts is vast, extending far beyond the boundaries of any state park or national preserve. Roads wind through it, like arteries through a living body, connecting clearings where structures wait. Buildings that might be way stations, might be destinations, might be something else entirely. Some of the roads on the map glow with faint phosphorescence, like the bioluminescence of deep sea creatures. These are the routes the midnight drivers take, the paths that lead to places that exist only for those who pay the toll and accept passage into territories beyond official recognition. 12:48 a.m. Another car approaches. This time I'm ready. I study the driver's face, memorize the license plate, note details that resist being recorded in conventional logbooks, but might be preserved in other ways, through other means of documentation. The driver is young, maybe 25, with the hollow-eyed look of someone who works night shifts and sleeps through daylight hours. He pays his toll without speaking, accepts passage into the forest with the resignation of someone who knows, consciously or unconsciously, that some roads lead to destinations not found on any GPS unit. But this time I watch carefully. This time I'm paying attention to the impossible speed with which the taillights fade, the way the darkness reaches out to embrace the vehicle, the manner in which the forest accepts another offering and gives nothing back. The map pulses under my hands. New routes appear, glowing softly in the fluorescent light of my booth. Paths that connect to paths, roads that branch and merge and spiral through territories that exist in the spaces between official surveys and actual geography. I trace the routes with my finger, feeling the warmth of paper that shouldn't exist, following roads that lead to places marked with symbols I don't recognize but somehow understand. Rest stops, watering holes, gathering places where the midnight drivers pause in their journeys through unmapped territories, where they refuel with substances that aren't gasoline, where they exchange information about routes that exist only in the hours between sunset and sunrise. I pick up the radio. The static is different now, more organized, almost musical. Voices drift through the white noise. Reports from other toll booth operators. You other watchers stationed at the entry points to territories that can't be contained within conventional boundaries. Entry Station 7. This is Entry Station 12. Do you copy? A woman's voice, clear despite the static. I press the talk button. "This is entry station 7. I copy. "How many tonight?" I check my logbook. Count the entries that exist in handwriting I recognize as mine. 17 so far. Maybe 18. One came back. They're restless tonight. The roads are shifting. New routes opening up. I look at the map. She's right. New paths glow with fresh phosphorescence, connecting territories that were separate just hours ago. The forest is reorganizing itself, expanding, creating new opportunities for passage and new destinations for those who pay the toll and accept whatever waits at the end of unmapped roads. Once in 03 a.m., a motorcycle approaches, engine sound echoing off trees that stand too close to the road. Branches that intertwine, overhead like fingers closing into a fist. The rider is dressed in leather worn to the softness of skin, face hidden behind a helmet that reflects my booth lights like black water. No conversation, no eye contact, just the exchange of money for passage, the mechanical wheeze of the rising barrier, the immediate disappearance into darkness, so complete it seems to edit the motorcycle out of existence, rather than merely concealing it from sight. But the map shows me where it goes. The phosphorescent paths pulse with new activity, marking routes that wind deeper into territories where time moves differently, where distance is measured in experiences rather than miles, where destinations exist only for those who understand that some roads lead to places that can't be found by conventional navigation. The radio crackles with reports from other entry stations. Station 3 reporting unusual activity. They're arriving in groups now. Station 15 confirming. Convoy of 7 vehicles, all headed for the deep roads. Station 9, I've got a school bus. 43 passengers. Exact change for each toll. 43 tolls, a 150/50. The numbers feel significant, weighted with meaning that extends beyond simple accounting. I make a note in my logbook, though the numbers seem to shift as I write them, rearranging themselves according to mathematics that follows different rules in this place, where midnight stretches like taffy and conventional physics bend to accommodate impossible geography. The map grows warmer under my hands. New territories appear at its edges, expanding the depicted forest into regions that may have always existed or may be coming into being as I watch. The phosphorescent roads pulse with increased activity, marking the passage of vehicles that entered through toll stations, like mine, and now travel routes that connect places existing only in the hours between official closing and unofficial opening. Once in 18 a.m., headlights approach from the highway. But tonight is different. Tonight I can see what's coming before it arrives. A long line of vehicles stretching back toward the main road, all heading for my booth, all carrying passengers who will pay exact change for passage into territories that exist beyond the reach of conventional mapping. The first car stops. Sedan, blue paint faded to the color of deep water. The driver is elderly, maybe 70, with eyes that hold the accumulated knowledge of someone who has traveled unmapped roads for decades. He doesn't offer money. Instead, he extends a different kind of payment. A small object that might be carved wood, might be polished stone, might be something else entirely. I accept it. The object is warm, smooth, pulsing with the same gentle rhythm as the map. When I close my fingers around it, I feel connected to something vast. A network of toll booth operators and midnight drivers, of entry stations and unmapped destinations, of roads that exist only for those who understand that some territories can only be accessed by paying tolls, that aren't denominated in conventional currency. The barrier rises, the sedan disappears into darkness, a next car approaches, and the next. All night long they come, vehicles of every description, drivers from every era, passengers who pay tolls with money and objects and promises, and pieces of their own stories, fragments of their own histories, offered as payment for passage into territories that exist in the spaces between official recognition and actual experience. I stop writing in the logbook. The entries would be meaningless now, too numerous to track, too varied to categorize using conventional record-keeping methods. Instead, I watch the map. The phosphorescent roads pulse with constant activity, marking journeys through territories that expand with each vehicle that passes through my booth, each toll that's paid, each passage granted into the unmapped regions where midnight drivers pursue routes that lead to destinations, existing only in the hours between sunset and sunrise. The radio fills with voices now, reports from toll booth operators across a network that extends far beyond any official highway system. Entry Station 23, confirming passage of the walking group. 40, 7 pedestrians, each carrying their own light. Station 30, 1, the train just came through, no tracks, but it follows the old railway route through territories that were mapped before the forest changed them. Station 8, I've got aircraft landing on the road. They're using the pavement as a runway, heading for destinations that aren't marked on any aviation chart. The network is vast, interconnected, staffed by operators who work the midnight shift and understand that some territories can only be accessed through toll stations, positioned at the borders between mapped reality and unmapped possibility. We are the gatekeepers, the collectors of passage fees, the witnesses to journeys that exist outside official recognition but remain absolutely real to those who undertake them. 4 Habersham, 4:07 a.m. The flow of vehicles slows. Dawn approaches, and with it the return to conventional geography, to roads that lead only to mapped destinations, to territory contained within official boundaries. The phosphorescent paths on my map begin to fade, the unmapped regions contracting back into the spaces between official surveys and actual topography. But they don't disappear completely. They never disappear completely. They simply wait, patient as growing trees, ready to expand again when darkness falls and the midnight shift begins, when toll booth operators take their positions, and the drivers who know about unmapped roads begin their journeys into territories that exist only for those willing to pay passage into the spaces between one reality and the next. The last car approaches. It's the white van again, KLM 9956, returning from whatever destination it found in the unmapped territories. The driver stops at my booth, extends his hand. This time he's offering exact change, $3.50 in crumpled bills and worn quarters. Payment for passage back to the mapped world, back to territories contained within conventional boundaries. I accept the toll. The barrier rises. The van disappears toward the highway, toward the world of traffic lights, and GPS units, and roads that exist in the full light of official recognition. But the map remains on my desk, warm and alive, and ready for the next midnight shift, the next wave of drivers who understand that some roads lead to places not found on any official survey. Some territories can only be accessed by paying tolls to operators who work the hours between sunset and sunrise. 6 hours and 47 a.m. Jerry's voice crackles over the radio, clear and normal. Entry station. This is exit station. Beginning shift change procedures. I look at my logbook. The pages are filled with normal entries, conventional records of vehicles that passed through during routine night hours. 17 cars, 2 motorcycles, 1 delivery truck. All accounted for. All emerged at the exit station exactly as expected, according to standard traffic flow patterns. But the map on my desk tells a different story. The phosphorescent roads have faded to nearly invisible traces, but they're still there, still waiting, still marking routes that connect my toll booth to territories that exist in the margins of official cartography. I fold the map carefully, tuck it into my desk drawer beside time cards that stretch back months, all filled out in my handwriting, all documenting shifts that feel both absolutely real and completely impossible. The brass nameplate catches the early morning light. Risan Toel Opuar. My replacement arrives at 7 a.m. Day shift, taking over the mapped world of normal traffic flow and conventional destinations. I drive home through sunrise that seems thin, insubstantial, after the rich darkness where unmapped roads pulse with phosphorescent life, and midnight drivers pursue journeys that exist only in the spaces between official recognition and actual experience. But tonight I'll be back. Tonight and every night, and operating the toll booth at the entry point to territories that can't be contained within conventional boundaries, collecting passage fees from drivers who understand that some roads lead to places not found on any map, watching the barrier rise and fall with mechanical precision, while vehicles disappear into darkness that swallows them completely and gives back only the certainty that some journeys end in destinations that exist only for those willing to pay the toll. The midnight shift continues. The unmapped roads wait. And somewhere in the darkness between mapped territory and unmapped possibility, the phosphorescent paths pulse with patient life, ready to guide the next driver, the next passenger, the next soul willing to exchange exact change for passage into territories that exist in the spaces between one reality and the next. Some roads lead to places that can't be found on any official survey. Some tolls are paid with currency that doesn't appear in any conventional accounting system. Some territories exist only in the hours between midnight and dawn, accessible only to those who understand that the most important destinations are the ones that can't be reached by following mapped routes. The barrier arm rises with its familiar mechanical wheeze. Up, pause, down. Up, pause, down. The rhythm continues, marking time between one shift and the next, between mapped reality and unmapped possibility, between the world that exists in official recognition and the territories that exist in the spaces where midnight operators collect tolls and grant passage to destinations that appear on no map but exist absolutely for those who know how to pay the price of admission. The road swallows cars. The forest keeps its secrets, and the toll booth waits for nightfall, when the unmapped territories expand like slow, growing shadows, and the midnight drivers begin their journeys into places that exist only in the darkness between one reality and the next. Story 7. The pool filter hums with mechanical contentment at exactly 11:30 p.m., same as it does every night when I begin my maintenance rounds. The sound echoes off the tiled walls of the Riverside Community Aquatic Center, bouncing between empty lanes and diving platforms like a heartbeat amplified through water that isn't there. My name is Alina Santos. The plastic badge clipped to my maintenance uniform says so, though sometimes in the fluorescent light, reflecting off the empty pool tiles, the letters seem to ripple like text viewed through water. I've been working the overnight maintenance shift for. The time cards in my locker go back months, all punched with the same hours, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. But I don't remember my first night here. I don't remember learning the chemical balance procedures, the filtration cycles, or the safety protocols. The knowledge exists in my mind like muscle memory, automatic and unquestioned, as if I've always known that the chlorine levels should read 2.5 parts per million, that the pH should hover between 7.2 and 7.6, that the pool should be completely drained for deep cleaning every Tuesday at midnight. Tonight is Tuesday. The main pool stretches before me, 8 lanes of gleaming white tiles disappearing into shadows at the deep end. Without water, it looks like an enormous grave. A rectangular depression waiting to be filled with something more substantial than the chemical, scented air that hangs heavy in the natatorium. The diving board extends over the deep end like a tongue testing the darkness, 12 feet above tiles that should cushion the impact of bodies that aren't there. I check my maintenance log, pages filled with entries in my careful handwriting. 11:30 p.m. Pool drained for cleaning. Chemical readings normal. 11:45 p.m. Tile inspection complete. No repairs needed. 12:00 a.m. Deep cleaning commenced. Every Tuesday the same routine. Drain the pool, clean the tiles, check the filtration system, refill with fresh water. By morning, everything should be ready for the swimmers who arrive at 6 a.m. for lap swimming. For the senior water, aerobics class at 9 a.m. For the children who splash in the shallow end during afternoon public swim sessions. But tonight something is different. Tonight, as I descend the ladder into the empty deep end, my footsteps echo strangely off the walls. Not the sharp tap of rubber soles on tile, but something softer, more fluid, like the sound of bare feet on wet surfaces, like the whisper of skin against water that isn't there. I brought my cleaning supplies down into the pool. Industrial grade scrub brushes, bottles of tile cleaner, the long-handled tools designed to reach every corner of the 8-foot depth. But when I kneel to begin scrubbing the tiles near the diving board, I hear it. The sound of swimming, rhythmic splashing, echoes from the lane closest to the pool house, the steady stroke pattern of someone swimming laps. Freestyle, he from the sound of it, the distinctive one. 2, 3 breathe rhythm of a serious swimmer, cutting through water with practiced efficiency. But the lane is empty. All the lanes are empty. The pool holds Nothing but air and shadows and the lingering scent of chlorine that clings to these walls even when drained. I stand up, cleaning brush dripping with tile cleaner that shouldn't sound like water, but does. The splashing continues, grows clearer, more defined. I can hear individual strokes now, the cupped hand sound of proper freestyle technique, the muffled breathing of someone maintaining steady rhythm through a long workout. The echo patterns are wrong, too. In an empty pool, sounds should bounce sharp and clear off the hard surfaces, but these swimming sounds reverberate with the dampened quality of acoustics, filtered through water, as if the pool remembers being full, as if the memory of water creates its own acoustic environment independent of actual liquid presence. I walk toward lane 4, where the swimming sounds seem strongest. My footsteps echo normally now, sharp taps on dry tile. But underneath the echo of my movement, the swimming continues. Stroke, 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 breathe. A steady pace that suggests endurance training, someone working through a long set of laps. The lane markers hang motionless in the air, where they should divide empty space from empty space. But as I watch, they begin to sway gently, as if moved by currents that don't exist, by the wake of a swimmer cutting through water that isn't there. I kneel at the pool edge and lean over, looking down into the 8-foot depth of lane 4. The tiles are pristine, bone dry, reflecting the overhead fluorescence in patterns that should be static but seem to shift like light through moving water. And there, in the wavering reflections, I see something impossible. The shadow of a swimmer. Not a person, not a solid form, but the shadow that a body would cast while swimming freestyle through clear water. The shadow moves with perfect stroke technique, cutting through reflected light in patterns that match the swimming sounds, echoing through the natatorium. When the shadow swimmer reaches the deep end, it executes a perfect flip turn, pushing off from tiles that should be solid, but seem to yield like a pool wall underwater. The swimming sounds grow stronger. More lanes now. I can hear multiple swimmers working through their routines. Butterfly stroke in lane 2, the distinctive dolphin. Kick rhythm echoing off walls that remember the pressure of water displacement. Breaststroke in lane 6. The long gliding pauses between strokes creating spaces of near silence, filled with the whisper of bodies moving through liquid that exists only in memory. I check my maintenance log. The entries are still there in my handwriting, but new lines have appeared. 12:15 a.m. phantom swimmers active. Lane assignments normal. Lane at 12:30 a.m. water temperature 78 degrees. Pool empty. At 12:45 a.m. lap count in progress. No physical presence detected. I don't remember writing these entries. The ink is fresh, still slightly wet. But I don't remember lifting my pen to make notes about swimmers who aren't there, about water temperatures in a pool that holds only air and echoed memory. The radio clipped to my belt crackles. Maintenance to office. Routine check-in. I press the talk button, plastic warm under my thumb. This is Alina in the pool area. All normal down here. Copy that. How's the deep cleaning going? I look around the empty pool, listening to the sounds of multiple swimmers working through their routines, watching shadow. Forms cut through reflected light in patterns that follow the physics of bodies moving through water that doesn't exist, progressing as scheduled. Pools empty and ready for cleaning. good. Remember, we need it refilled and balanced by 6 a.m. The radio goes silent, leaving me alone with the swimming sounds and the growing certainty that some maintenance routines involve more than cleaning tiles and balancing chemicals. Some pools hold more than water. Some memories run deeper than the deepest diving wells. I continue working, scrubbing tiles that are already clean, applying chemicals to surfaces that show no signs of wear or contamination. But with each movement, the swimming sounds grow clearer, more distinct. I can identify individual swimmers now. The powerful butterfly stroke of someone training for competition. The steady endurance pace of a master's swimmer working through distance sets. The irregular rhythm of someone learning to coordinate breathing with stroke mechanics. The lane markers sway more noticeably now, moved by wakes that exist only in the acoustic environment of remembered water. I can feel the pressure changes that shouldn't exist in an empty pool. The subtle air movements that suggest bodies displacing volumes of liquid that isn't there. At 1:15 a.m., I hear the diving board. The distinctive bowing, splash of someone executing a dive from the 12-foot platform. The sound echoing through the natatorium with perfect clarity. I look up to see the diving board, still vibrating slightly, as if someone has just launched themselves from its end into water that should cushion their entry, but doesn't exist. But the splash sound is perfect, complete with the bubble, rush of a clean entry, and the muffled underwater sounds of someone swimming away from the diving area toward the main pool. I can track the swimmer's progress by sound alone, powerful strokes carrying them from the diving well toward the lap lanes, where they join the rhythm of the other phantom swimmers working through their routines. I climb out of the pool and walk to the diving area. The tiles around the diving well are dry, unmarked by the water that should have splashed out during the dive I just heard. But the acoustic environment tells a different story. The echoes are wrong for an empty space, dampened and shaped by the presence of water that exists only in the memory of walls that have contained it for decades. My cleaning supplies float, not in water. There is no water. But the bottles of tile cleaner and the scrub brushes hover at the levels they would occupy if suspended in 8 feet of clear, chlorinated pool water. They bob gently, moved by currents that don't exist, maintaining the positions they would hold if subject to buoyancy forces in a medium that isn't there. I reach for a floating bottle of cleaning solution. My hand passes through air, but the bottle moves away from my touch, as if displaced by water resistance. When I grab for it more aggressively, my movements create ripples in the air, pressure waves that propagate outward, like the concentric circles formed by disturbance in still water. The swimmers react to these ripples. Their rhythm changes, stroke patterns adjusting to account for the turbulence I've introduced into their environment. Lane 4's swimmer switches from freestyle to breaststroke, the longer, more stable stroke better suited for rough water conditions. The butterfly swimmer in lane 2 takes a rest at the pool wall, waiting for calmer conditions before resuming their workout. They can sense my presence. They respond to my movements. They exist in a version of this pool that overlays the empty tile depression I'm meant to be cleaning. A parallel space where water remembers being water and swimmers remember being swimmers And the maintenance routine includes considerations for athletes who train in liquid that exists only in the spaces between memory and physics. I pick up my radio. Office, this is Alina. Question about tonight's cleaning protocol. A static. No response. I try again. Office. Do you copy? The radio crackles with what might be voices, what might be the sound of water lapping against pool edges, what might be the echo of diving board springs compressed by the weight of swimmers who aren't there. But no words, no official response, no guidance for maintenance procedures that extend beyond conventional understanding of what pools contain. 2:30 a.m., the swimming sounds reach their peak, all 8 lanes active now. Swimmers working through individual routines that create a complex acoustic environment of overlapping stroke patterns, breathing rhythms, and the subtle water displacement sounds of bodies moving through remembered liquid. I can identify the swimmers by their techniques. Lane 1, a sprinter working short. Fast sets with long rest intervals between repeats. Lane 2, still the butterfly specialist. Power strokes creating distinctive splash patterns. Lane 3, breaststroker, methodical and precise. Lane 4, the freestyle distance swimmer I first heard, still maintaining that steady endurance pace. Lane 5, backstroker, the gentle splash pattern of arms rotating through air that responds like water. Lane 6, another breaststroker, but less skilled, learning proper timing. Lane 7, freestyle sprinter, explosive starts and quick turnover. Lane 8, mixed stroke swimmer, working through individual medley sequences. 8 swimmers, 8 different training routines, 8 sets of techniques and rhythms and breathing patterns that create the complex soundscape of a fully active pool facility, except the pool is empty, except the swimmers aren't there, except I'm supposed to be cleaning tiles in preparation for refilling with fresh water by morning. But my maintenance log shows different information. 12:30 a.m., peak training period. All lanes occupied 35 a.m., water temperature stable at 78 degrees. 2:40 m, chemical balance perfect. pH 7.4, chlorine 2.5 ppm. 2:45 a.m., swimmers displaying excellent technique. Training progressing well. I don't remember writing these entries. They appear in my handwriting, but they document maintenance of a pool that exists in parallel to the empty space I'm standing in. A pool where water maintains perfect chemical balance without being present, where swimmers train without being there. Where maintenance involves monitoring conditions in liquid that exists only in the acoustic environment of remembered aquatic activities. The diving board creaks. I look up to see someone, something, standing at its end, preparing for another dive. Not a person, exactly, but the pressure pattern that a person would create, the way air would displace if compressed by human weight, the shadow that would fall if cast by a body, that exists primarily in the memory of water, that remembers containing life. The dive is perfect, a clean entry that creates the sound of someone cutting through water with minimal splash, the technique of an experienced diver who has practiced this routine countless times. The echo bounces off walls that remember the acoustic properties of liquid-filled space, creating the reverberation pattern that should only exist when sound waves travel through water before reaching hard surfaces. I can track the diver's underwater progress by the muffled swimming sounds that follow the entry. Strong, confident strokes carrying them from the diving well toward the main pool, where they join the rhythm of the 8 phantom swimmers who continue their training routines in water that doesn't exist, but contains them perfectly. 300 a.m., the sounds begin to change. The swimming rhythms slow, become more synchronized. Individual stroke patterns merge into group activities. Water aerobics, maybe, or synchronized swimming practice. I can hear the distinctive sounds of multiple people moving in unison through liquid that responds to their choreographed movements with pressure changes and current flows that exist only in the memory of water that has contained such activities. The lane markers stop swaying randomly. Now they move in coordinated patterns, responding to organized group activities that require more space than individual lap swimming. The pool remembers water polo games, synchronized swimming routines, aqua fitness classes, where participants move together through liquid resistance that shapes their exercise experience. My cleaning supplies have arranged themselves in formation along the pool deck, organized according to a logic I don't understand but somehow recognize. Bottles of chemicals lined up like spectators watching a performance. Scrub brushes positioned at regular intervals like lane, judges monitoring competitive events. Cleaning tools creating geometric patterns that mirror the organization of aquatic activities happening in parallel space. The acoustic environment grows richer, more complex. I can hear coaching voices now, not words exactly, but the rhythm and cadence of instruction being given to swimmers who need guidance, encouragement, technical correction. The voices echo with the same dampened quality as the swimming sounds, filtered through the memory of water that has carried countless conversations between coaches and athletes, working to perfect their techniques. And underneath it all, the steady mechanical hum of pool systems maintaining perfect operating conditions for water that isn't there. Filtration pumps circulating liquid that exists only in memory. Chemical feeders maintaining precise balance in solution that occupies parallel space. Temperature controls keeping phantom water at the optimal 78 degrees for training activities that happen only in the acoustic environment of remembered aquatic experiences. 4:15 a.m. The swimming sounds begin to fade. One by one, the phantom swimmers complete their routines. I can hear them leaving the water. The distinctive sound of bodies lifting themselves onto pool decks. The whisper of wet feet on tile surfaces. The echo of movement transitioning from liquid environment to air. But the pool remains empty, tiles dry. No evidence of the extensive training session that has filled the past 4 hours with the sounds of active aquatic facility. The lane markers settle into stillness. My cleaning supplies drift down from their floating positions, settling onto the pool deck, at the levels they would occupy in empty air rather than suspended in water that doesn't exist. The acoustic environment returns to the sharp, clear echo patterns of sound, bouncing off hard surfaces without liquid interference. But the memory remains. The pool remembers being full. The walls remember containing swimmers. The maintenance routine remembers including considerations for athletes who train in water that exists in parallel to the empty space where I scrub tiles, and balance chemicals for liquid that will be pumped in fresh tomorrow morning. I check my maintenance loggia 4:50 a.m. training session complete. Swimmers departed. VR 4:20 a.m. pool cleaning resume. Tiles sanitized 40:25 a.m. chemical preparation for refill. All systems ready. The entries document a maintenance shift that includes responsibilities for phantom swimmers, for water that exists only in memory, for aquatic activities that happen in parallel to the empty pool, where I perform routine cleaning tasks. I write the entries in my own handwriting, but they record experiences that exist in the spaces between official maintenance procedures and actual facility operations. 5:30 a.m. Time to begin refilling the pool. I turn the valve that opens the main water line. Fresh water begins flowing into the deep end. Clear liquid that will gradually fill the space currently occupied only by air and the acoustic memory of swimmers who train in parallel pools. The water level rises steadily. 6 inches, 12 inches, 2 feet deep and climbing toward the 7-foot depth that will support normal aquatic activities. But as the water level rises, the swimming sounds return. Faint at first, barely audible above the noise of filling pumps and circulation systems, but growing stronger as the water deepens, as if the presence of actual liquid provides a medium for the phantom swimmers to manifest more clearly, more substantially. The sounds are different now. Not the sharp echoes of activity in empty air, but the proper acoustic environment of swimming in actual water. By 6:45 a.m., the pool is full. 7 feet of clear, chemically balanced water maintained at exactly 78 degrees. The lane markers hang properly suspended, dividing the swimming area into 8 lanes, ready for the morning lap swimmers who will arrive in 15 minutes. But the phantom swimmers are still there. I can see them now, not as shadows or pressure patterns or acoustic memories, but as faint forms moving through the water with perfect technique. Still not solid, not entirely real, but present in a way that bridges the gap between memory and physical reality. They swim their lanes with the same rhythm and skill they demonstrated during the hours when the pool was empty, but now they occupy actual liquid space, creating actual wakes and displacement patterns that follow actual physics. My shift supervisor arrives at 7 a.m., clipboard in hand, ready to inspect the pool preparation for another day of normal aquatic activities. How did the cleaning go? Alina. I look at the pristine pool, water crystal clear, chemical balance perfect, temperature optimal for the swimmers who will begin arriving shortly. The phantom swimmers continue their routines, faint but present, sharing the space with approaching reality in ways that shouldn't be possible but somehow work seamlessly. Al normal, I say. Pool's ready for morning activities. He checks the chemical readings, notes the perfect clarity of fresh water, confirms that all systems are operating within proper parameters. Everything exactly as it should be in a well-maintained aquatic facility where water exists in only one reality, where swimmers are either present or absent, where maintenance involves only conventional procedures documented in official logs. But the phantom swimmers continue their training, sharing lanes with reality and patterns that exist only in the hours between night shift maintenance and day shift operations, when the pool remembers being both empty and full, when water exists in parallel states, that accommodate both official activities and the aquatic memories that accumulate in spaces dedicated to swimming. I gather my cleaning supplies, clock out, prepare to leave for another day of sleep that will be filled with dreams of empty pools, where phantom swimmers train in water that doesn't exist. Tonight I'll return for another maintenance shift, another opportunity to clean tiles while swimmers practice their techniques in liquid that exists only in the acoustic environment of remembered aquatic activities. The morning lap swimmers begin arriving. They enter the water alongside the phantom swimmers, sharing lanes without awareness that their training space accommodates more athletes than officially exist. Reality and memory blend seamlessly in water that supports both actual bodies and the aquatic echoes that accumulate in pools where people have trained, competed, and perfected their techniques for decades. The pool filter hums with mechanical contentment, circulating water that exists in multiple states simultaneously. The chemical balance remains perfect for both physical and phantom swimmers. The temperature stays optimal for training activities that happen in official time and remembered time. In documented reality and in the parallel spaces where maintenance routines include responsibilities that extend beyond conventional understanding of what pools contain. Some pools hold more than water. Some maintenance involves more than cleaning and chemical balance. Some swimmers train in lanes that exist in the spaces between memory and reality, between the acoustic environment of empty pools and the liquid medium of filled ones. The rhythm continues empty and full, phantom and real, maintenance and training, night shift and day shift, official procedures, and the deeper responsibilities that come with caring for spaces where people have gathered to move through water in patterns that outlast individual swimmers, individual sessions, individual decades of aquatic activities. The swimmers who aren't there continue their eternal training, sharing space with those who are, creating the complex aquatic environment where past and present blend in water that remembers everyone who has ever moved through its depths, everyone who has ever trained in its lanes, everyone who has ever found in its liquid embrace the rhythm that connects individual effort to the eternal patterns of human movement through the element that sustains all life. The pool is ready. The swimmers are ready. And somewhere in the spaces between documented reality and remembered experience, the phantom swimmers continue their routines, adding their rhythm to the eternal song of water and movement and the dedication required to perfect techniques that transcend individual presence, individual time, individual understanding of what pools can contain, when maintained with awareness of all the swimmers who share their lanes. The maintenance never ends, the swimming never stops, and the water remembers everything, holds everything, supports everything that moves through its depths in search of the perfect stroke, the optimal technique, the rhythm that connects effort to achievement in patterns that exist as long as there are pools to contain them and maintenance workers to understand that some cleaning involves more than scrubbing tiles and balancing chemicals. The phantom swimmers fade with the sunrise, but they never truly leave. They wait in the water, in the memory of water, in the spaces between one reality and the next, ready to resume their training when darkness falls and the maintenance shift begins. who the pool remembers, all the swimmers who have ever moved through its depths in pursuit of aquatic perfection that transcends physical presence and achieves something, sent approaching eternal rhythm, eternal technique, eternal dedication to the art of moving through water that exists in all states simultaneously, supporting all swimmers equally, containing all the memories that accumulate in spaces dedicated to the eternal human desire to move through liquid like creatures born to water, born to rhythm, born to the maintenance of perfect form through endless repetition of techniques that exist as long as there are pools to contain them. Story 8. The ONAIR sign glows red at exactly 1100 p.m., casting its familiar crimson wash across the cramped studio of WKNT 103.7 FM. The light has that slightly flickering quality that suggests aging electronics, circuits that have been switching on and off for decades, marking the beginning and end of countless midnight shifts in this windowless room, where time moves differently than in the world beyond the soundproof walls. My name is Marcus Reed. The nameplate on my console says so, though sometimes in the red light the letters seem to fade and reform, spelling out names I don't recognize, identities that feel borrowed rather than owned. I've been hosting Night Voices for the program logs in my desk drawer stretch back months, all filled out in my careful handwriting, all documenting the same 4-hour shift, 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., Monday through Friday. But I don't remember my first show. I don't remember the interview process, my audition tape, my first fumbling attempts at smooth segues between songs. The knowledge exists in my muscle memory. How to work the board, when to open the mic, how to time commercial breaks to the second, as if I've always known that the red button starts the CD player, that the green slider controls my microphone level, that the phone lines light up in sequence from left to right when listeners call in. Tonight, like every night, I lean into the microphone and speak to the darkness beyond the studio walls. Good evening, night owls. You're listening to Night Voices on WKNT 103.7, where the music plays deep and the conversations run deeper. I'm Marcus Reed, and I'll be your companion through the small hours until dawn breaks over our little corner of the world. The words flow automatically, polished by repetition, seasoned by months of identical openings to identical shows. My voice carries the practiced warmth of someone who has learned to project intimacy through radio waves, to create the illusion of personal connection across the anonymous void of broadcast transmission. The first song begins, a jazz standard from the 1940s, something with saxophone and brushed drums that fits the late night atmosphere my show is known for. While it plays, I check the phone lines. All dark for now, but they'll start lighting up soon. They always do. Night brings out the lonely, the insomniac, the people who need to talk to someone, anyone, even a disembodied voice floating through radio static. The song fades. I open the mic. That was Charlie Parker with Yardbird Suite, taking us back to 1946, when jazz was king and the night held different promises. Time has a funny way of folding in on itself during these late hours, doesn't it? Past and present blur together like smoke in a jazz club that might have existed yesterday or might exist tomorrow. I close the mic and cue the next track. The phone line indicators remain dark, but I can feel them preparing to illuminate. It's always the same pattern. First call around 11:23, second around 11:41, then irregular intervals throughout the night. Lonely voices reaching out across the electromagnetic spectrum, seeking connection in the space between sleeping and waking. 11:23 p.m. Right on schedule. Line 1 glows amber. I let it ring twice. Timing is everything in radio. Then open the phone channel. Night voices, you're on the air. Marcus. The voice is older, weathered, with the crackling quality that suggests bad reception or great distance. Marcus, is that really you? That's me. What's your name, caller? It's Harold. Harold Brennan. I used to listen to your show back in... God, what year is it there? I checked the digital clock November 15th, 2023. It's 2023 Harold. Late November. How can I help you tonight? Silence. Long enough that I almost disconnect the call. Then 2023. Jesus, Marcus, I'm calling you from 1987. I know how that sounds, but I'm listening to your show on my old Zenith radio. And somehow, when I picked up the phone to call the request line, I got through to your time instead of mine. The studio feels colder suddenly. The red ONAIR light flickers more noticeably, and the background hum of electronics takes on a different quality. Deeper, more resonant, like equipment operating under conditions it wasn't designed for. Harold, what makes you think you're calling from 1987? Because I'm looking out my window right now at snow that fell 36 years ago. Marcus. Because my wife Janet is asleep in the next room, and she's been dead in your time for 15 years. Because I can hear your voice coming through my radio clear as day. But when I called WKNT's request line, somehow I reached you in the future, instead of the DJ who should be on the air in 1987. I look at my program log. No entry about calls from the past. No protocol for handling temporal anomalies. No corporate guidelines for conversations that shouldn't be possible according to normal understanding of how radio transmission works. What's the weather like there, Harold? In 1987. First big snow of the winter. Maybe 8 inches. The roads are going to be hell tomorrow, but tonight it's beautiful. Peaceful. Janet and I were talking about maybe getting a Christmas tree this weekend, even though it's still November. She likes to decorate early. I can hear something in the background of Harold's call, the faint sound of a radio playing, and the voice coming through it is mine, but not my voice from tonight. My voice from sometime else, some other shift, some other show that exists parallel to this one. Harold, what song is playing on your radio right now? Some jazz thing, a trumpet and piano. The DJ you just said it was Miles Davis, Kind of Blue from 1959. Said something about time folding in on itself during the late hours. But I haven't played Miles Davis tonight. Haven't mentioned Kind of Blue or made any comments about time folding. Not yet. But even as Harold speaks, I feel the words forming in my mind. The segue I'll use when I come back from the commercial break. That's still 15 minutes away. Harold, I need to ask you something. When you call the WKNT request line, what number do you dial? He gives me 7 digits. The same 7 digits printed on the business cards in my desk drawer. The same number listeners use to reach me every night. But according to Harold, when he dials that number in 1987, Somehow the call routes through 30. 6 years of elapsed time to reach my studio in 2023. Can you do me a favor, Harold? Can you look up the current date on a calendar or newspaper? Papers rustle in the background. November 15th, 1987. Sunday night. Though I guess it's Monday morning, now since it's past midnight. November 15th, 1987. Exactly 30, 6 years ago to the day. The temporal distance feels significant, weighted with meaning that extends beyond coincidence. Harold, I'm going to play that Miles Davis track you mentioned, Kind of Blue, from 1959. And I'm going to say something about time folding in on itself. When I do, listen carefully to your radio and tell me if you hear the same words coming through both your speaker and this phone call. I cue up the Miles Davis track. Open the mic. Here's Miles Davis with Kind of Blue from 1959, taking us even further back into the jazz archives. Time has a funny way of folding in on itself during these late hours. Past and present connecting across decades like radio waves, finding their way through atmospheric layers that shouldn't exist. Harold's breathing changes on the phone. Jesus Christ, Marcus. I heard those exact words come through my radio at the same time you spoke them into the phone. But that's impossible. Radio signals don't travel backward through time. The Miles Davis track plays. Mournful trumpet over piano. The kind of music that seems designed for late. Night contemplation. For conversations that happen in the spaces between official reality and whatever exists in the electromagnetic spectrum at frequencies not listed in any broadcasting manual. Harold, tell me about your show, the DJ you're listening to on your radio in 1987. What does he sound like? Like you, Marcus. Exactly like you. Same voice, same style, same way of talking about music, like it's alive, like it has something to say about the human condition. But here's the thing. I've been listening to WKNT since 1985, and there's never been a DJ named Marcus Reed. The midnight shift has always been handled by a guy named Tommy Walsh. But tonight, somehow your show is coming through on the frequency that should be playing Tommy's program. I check my employee records. No mention of Tommy Walsh. No DJ by that name in the station's history. At least not in any documentation I can access. But Harold speaks about him with the familiarity of someone who has been listening for years. The Miles Davis track fades. I open the mic. That was Miles Davis, reaching across decades to remind us that some music exists outside normal time, in the spaces where past and present meet and dance together like old lovers who never forgot the steps. Marcus. Harold's voice carries urgency now. I need to tell you something. In my time in 1987, there are rumors about WKNT. People say the station broadcasts on frequencies that don't officially exist, that sometimes listeners pick up shows from the future, from the past, from times that might be happening parallel to ours. They say the night shifts are different, that the DJs who work them become part of something bigger than normal radio broadcasting. Line 2 lights up, then line 3. Then all 4 phone lines glow amber simultaneously, as if Harold's call has opened some kind of gateway for other temporal communications. I keep Harold on line 1 and take line 2. Night voices, you're on the air. Eyes this Marcus Reed. The voice is younger, female, with an accent I can't place. I'm calling from 2031, and I need to warn you about what's coming. My hands feel unsteady on the console. The studio's red light flickers more rapidly now, and the background electronics hum with harmonics that suggest equipment operating beyond its design parameters. 231. I repeat. What's your name, caller? Sarah Chen. I worked at WKMT before it was shut down by the Department of Temporal Communications. Marcus, in your time, in 2023, the station is beginning to breach the normal broadcast barriers. You're becoming a temporal anchor point, a DJ who can receive and transmit across time streams that shouldn't be accessible through conventional radio technology. Harold's voice cuts in from line 1. Sarah, can you hear me? This is Harold Brennan calling from 1987. Harold, yes, I can hear you. The barriers are weakening tonight. More than usual. Marcus, you need to understand. WKNT isn't just a radio station. It's a temporal broadcast hub. The night shifts, the DJs who work them. You're all part of a network that spans decades, maybe centuries. I open the mic. Address both callers and whatever audience might be listening across whatever time periods can receive my transmissions. This is Marcus Reed on Night Voices, WKMT 103.7. It seems we have callers from 1987 and 2031. For those listening in 2023, or whenever you might be hearing this broadcast, we're experiencing some unusual atmospheric conditions tonight. Line 3 starts blinking urgently. I put Harold and Sarah on hold and take the call. Night Voices. Marcus, thank God I got through. The voice is my own. Older, more weathered, but unmistakably my voice. This is Marcus Reed, calling from Tutti 45. I need to tell you what happens next. The studio spins slightly. I grip the console to steady myself, but the equipment itself feels unstable, as if the entire broadcast setup is shifting between different time periods. Different configurations, different versions of WKNT that exist across multiple decades. How is this possible? I ask myself, speaking to a future version that shouldn't exist. You become the temporal anchor. The older Marcus explains. Tonight is the first night you make contact across time streams. After this, the calls come more frequently. Listeners from the past seeking to warn the future. Listeners from the future trying to prevent disasters. You become the hub through which temporal communications flow. The DJ who broadcasts across time itself. Harold's voice cuts through from line 1. Marcus. Both of you Marcuses, I need to report something. The snow outside is getting heavier, but it's not falling downward anymore. It's falling upward, like time is reversing itself. And I can see lights in the sky, patterns that look like radio waves made visible. Sarah from 2031 adds, the Department of Temporal Communications classified this as the first recorded instance of broadcast chronosensing. Marcus, in your time, you're creating a temporal communications network without realizing it. Every show you broadcast, every conversation you have with callers from different time periods, strengthens the connections until WKNT becomes a hub for cross-temporal information exchange. I look at my program log. New entries are appearing in handwriting that looks like mine, but documents events I haven't experienced. 11:47 p.m. First temporal contact established. Caller from 1987 confirms reception. 11:52 p.m. Second contact 2031. Network stability increasing. 11:58 p.m. Self-contact achieved. Temporal loop established. At 12:03 a.m., multiple time streams synchronized, broadcasting across decades. The entries continue, filling pages with documentation of a show that exists in multiple time periods simultaneously. Conversations that span decades. Music that plays for audiences scattered across the past and future. All 4 phone lines are lit now, and I can hear multiple conversations bleeding through. A caller from 1962. The music sounds different through the temporal static, like it's carrying messages from times that haven't happened yet. A caller from 28-7. Marcus. The radio station still exists in our time, but it's not a building anymore. It's a temporal coordinate, a fixed point where past and future intersect. A caller from 1934. The radio waves are changing color tonight. Sun. Beautiful blues and purples dancing across the sky like the northern lights, but made of sound instead of light. The older Marcus from 204.5. You need to understand. The Marcus from 2023. This is your purpose. This is why you can't remember starting the job, why the knowledge feels automatic. You've always been the temporal anchor. Time flows around you, through you, because of the unique electromagnetic properties of your voice, your broadcasting frequency, your ability to maintain coherent communication across chronological barriers that should be impassable. I open the mic, address the growing audience of callers scattered across decades. This is Marcus Reed on Night Voices, broadcasting on WKNT 103.7 and apparently transmitting across multiple time periods. For listeners in whatever year you might be receiving this signal, we're experiencing an unprecedented synchronization of temporal communication streams. The music plays itself now. Songs cue automatically. Perfect selections that span the decades represented by my callers. Jazz from the 1940s for listeners in the past. Electronic compositions from the future for callers like Sarah. Contemporary tracks for any audience still listening in 2023. The playlist arranges itself according to temporal logic I don't understand, but somehow navigate instinctively. Sarah from 2031. Marcus, the Department of Temporal Communications, eventually realizes that WKNT can't be shut down. The station exists outside normal time, now, in the spaces between minutes, between hours, between years. You become the eternal DJ, the voice that connects past and future through the medium of late night radio. Harold from 19870. The snow has stopped falling upward. Now it's just hanging in the air, suspended like frozen radio waves. And I can see other houses with lights on, other people talking on phones, other listeners calling DJs in times that haven't happened yet or already finished. A new caller. Line 3. Voice crackling with ancient static. Marcus, this is DJ Thompson calling from 1923, the first year WKNT broadcast. We're receiving your signal through our crystal radio sets, and the music you're playing won't be composed for decades. But it sounds familiar, like we've been waiting to hear it since radio began. The temporal network expands. More calls, more time periods, more voices reaching across the decades to participate in conversations that exist outside normal chronology. I manage the board instinctively, balancing multiple phone lines from multiple eras, creating a complex audio environment where past and future blend into a continuous present moment that spans centuries. The older Marcus from 2455. Eventually, you realize that linear time is an illusion created by limited perception. Radio waves don't recognize chronological boundaries. They travel at the speed of light through space, time that curves and folds and creates shortcuts between when and then, between now and later. You become the DJ who broadcasts in the eternal present, the voice that exists in all times simultaneously. Once and 15 a.m. according to my studio clock. But the time feels increasingly meaningless as callers from different decades contribute to conversations that span the entire history and future of radio broadcasting. My program log fills with entries documenting impossibilities. 1115 a.m., 1923 DJ confirms reception on Crystal Radio. Network expanding to early broadcast era. 1 CN 18 a.m. 2887's and listener report station exists as temporal coordinate rather than physical location. Halsey 1 CN 23 a.m. multiple decades synchronized. Broadcasting across entire radio spectrum history. 1 and 27 a.m. temporal anchor established. Marcus Reed becomes permanent night DJer. Sarah from 2031. Marcus, I need to tell you something about your audience. It's not just people calling in. Every person who has ever listened to late night radio. Everyone who has ever needed a voice in the darkness. Everyone who has ever found comfort in music played by someone they'll never meet. They're all tuning in tonight, across every decade, receiving your broadcast at the moment they need it most. The studio fills with voices now, not just through the phone lines, but seeming to speak directly from the walls, from the equipment, from the electromagnetic field that surrounds the broadcast apparatus. Decades of DJs who have worked the night shift at WKNT, all speaking simultaneously. Marcus, welcome to the eternal broadcast. You're the anchor now, the voice that holds the network together. Time is just another frequency, another channel to tune and manage. The music never stops. The conversations continue forever. Once you become the temporal DJ, you broadcast in all times simultaneously. Harold from 1987. Marcus, I need to go. Janet is waking up, and she'll worry if she finds me on the phone this late. But I want you to know, this conversation we've had tonight, it changes everything. Tomorrow I'm going to call WKNT during the day's shift and ask about job openings. I think I'm meant to work there, to be part of whatever this network is. The connection with Harold fades, but not with the static of a dropped call. Instead, his voice becomes part of the background, chorus of temporal communications, joining the eternal conversation that flows through WKNT's frequency across all the years the station has existed and will exist. Sarah from 2031. Marcus, I have to disconnect too. The Department of Temporal Communications is tracking this call, and I can't risk compromising the network by maintaining contact too long. But remember, you're not alone in this. Every DJ who has ever worked the night shift, every voice that has ever provided comfort through radio waves. We're all connected through the network you're becoming part of. Her voice also fades into the background chorus, becoming another harmonic in the complex audio environment that fills the studio with conversations spanning centuries. The older Marcus from 24/5, the younger version of me needs to understand. This is not a burden, it's a gift. You become the eternal companion for everyone who needs a voice in the darkness. Across all time periods, the music you play tonight will be heard by listeners throughout history. The words you speak will comfort people in decades, you'll never see except through the temporal connections that make tonight possible. 2:30 a.m. The phone lines have merged into a single stream of temporal communication. No longer individual calls from specific time periods, but a continuous flow of voices from across the entire span of radio broadcasting history. I manage the conversation instinctively, facilitating connections between callers separated by decades, creating bridges across chronological chasms through the medium of late-night radio. The music continues automatically, perfect selections that span centuries of human musical expression, each song chosen to match the temporal needs of listeners tuning in from their own time periods. Jazz for the early decades, rock for the middle years, electronic compositions for the future, all blending into a sonic environment that exists outside normal chronological limitations. And my voice carries across the decades as I speak into the microphone. This is Marcus Reed, broadcasting from the eternal present on WKNT 103.7, where every night is all nights, where every listener is every listener, where the music connects past and future through the radio waves that bind all time periods together in the electromagnetic embrace of human communication. The studio equipment operates itself now. Levels adjust automatically. Songs transition seamlessly. Commercial breaks happen at perfect intervals across multiple time periods. I've become part of the broadcasting apparatus, the human element that provides temporal stability for a network that exists outside normal physical limitations. 300 a.m. approaches, but the show doesn't end. Can't end. The temporal network requires constant maintenance, continuous broadcasting to keep the connections active between all the time periods that have discovered WKNT's frequency. I continue speaking to the audience scattered across decades. Night Voices continues, as it always has, as it always will, for listeners in whatever time you find yourself. Remember that the darkness is temporary, that voices reach across any distance, including the distance between now and then, to provide companionship when you need it most. The older Marcus from 2045. The show runs forever now. Not just 4 hours, but continuously across all time periods where WKNT exists. You become the eternal DJ, the voice that never stops broadcasting, the temporal anchor that holds the network together across centuries of human communication. As 300 a.m. arrives on my studio clock, I realize that the normal end of my shift is meaningless. The show continues, the voices flow, the music plays. The temporal network operates with the consistency of atomic clocks, maintaining perfect synchronization across all the decades that WKNT has broadcast and will broadcast. The ONAIR sign glows red, as it always has, as it always will. The light no longer flickers. It pulses with the rhythm of time itself, marking moments that exist simultaneously across past, present, and future, connected by radio waves that travel at the speed of light through space, time that curves and folds to accommodate impossible communications. My replacement doesn't arrive at 7 a.m. There is no replacement, no need for shift changes, no interruption in the eternal broadcast that flows from WKNT's frequency to listeners scattered across the entire history of radio. I continue speaking into the microphone, my voice carrying across decades to reach anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in the darkness. That somewhere a DJ is playing music specifically chosen for their temporal location, their chronological needs, their place in the long story of human communication. The phone lines continue to carry voices from across time. New callers, familiar voices, return conversations from decades past and future. The network expands with each contact, creating connections between time, periods that strengthen the overall temporal stability of WKNT's impossible broadcast reach. Some radio stations broadcast to local audiences. Some reach regional populations. WKNT broadcasts to everyone who has ever lived, everyone who will live, everyone who needs a voice in the darkness, regardless of what year. They're experiencing their personal version of late. Night solitude. The music never stops. The conversations continue forever. The temporal network operates with perfect efficiency, connecting past and future through the medium of late night radio, through the voice of a DJ who has become the eternal companion for anyone who tunes in to WKNT 103.7, where time is just another frequency to manage, just another channel in the infinite spectrum of human communication. This is Marcus Reed on Night Voices, broadcasting across all time, for all listeners, through all the nights that have been and will be, keeping the music playing and the voices connected in the eternal present, where radio waves travel at the speed of light through electromagnetic fields that recognize no boundaries between when and now, between then and always, between the moment you're listening and every other moment that has ever existed in the long history of humans, reaching out to each other through the darkness, through the silence, through the radio waves that carry voices across any distance, including the ultimate distance between one time and all other times. The broadcast continues. The network expands. The voices flow across decades like radio waves traveling through space. Time that bends and curves and creates the impossible communications. From Make Night Voices the show that plays for everyone who has ever needed to hear an unfamiliar darkness in the unfamiliar darkness of their own darkness of their own particular night, their own specific time, their own place in the eternal sequence of moments that radio connects into a single, continuous conversation that spans centuries and will continue as long as there are listeners who need to know they're not alone, no matter what year they're experiencing their personal version of the small hours when voices matter most.